and into your truth, pure truth. You stepped out of a vacant tomb to display your wounds in locked rooms. When I stare up at the clouds, I'm reminded that each both will take their bow to fulfill an ancient vow. Beauty fades away. Time will keep. Time will surely keep. Flesh and blood. Our bodies of dust and dirt. Death is free. Our place of appointed slave. Who will save us from the nemesis of man? When will our Savior bring us to the promised land? What can I offer you? I'm just the man who seeks your glory. When can I run to you? My heart and feet feel migratory. I wanna run, I wanna run, I wanna run. When I scan these murky skies, I'm reminded that the firmaments will hide from the one who brings his bride. As I sail the tossing sea, reminiscing that your death will be set free from the fetters of the deep. Men who build their wicked towers to slow as the time draws closer to the hour when your kingdom comes with power. When your kingdom comes with power.
Welcome, everyone. This is Kingdom Portions, and I'm your host, Sean. You're watching this on Kingdom in Context. So I just want to thank you all for being here this morning, and hopefully you're ready for an awesome Torah portion. We're going to be reading through Genesis 23 through 25, and then also look at some companion passages with Ruth and John. So right now, though, I want to bring on a couple of guests to join me to read this morning, and we want to introduce Josh. Welcome, brother.
How's it going, buddy?
Good. Glad to have you join me today to read these.
Yeah,
and
man.
We also have our brother Matthew Beavers from Back to the Covenant. Welcome, brother. Oh, we got to get you unmuted there. There you go.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Yep, Shabbat shalom, brothers.
Shabbat shalom.
So we are diving into chapter 23 through 25 of Genesis, and I'm kind of excited. This is a unique These are unique stories in here, and we're going to get to pair them with Ruth and also John. So I'm kind of excited because this was a fun one to work on and to study throughout the week. So hopefully you guys will feel the same as we go through this.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, let me pull this up real quick, and we will get started. All right. Josh, would you like to start reading?
Sure.
All right.
That would be great. All right. Genesis 23, verse 1 says, Now Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went out to mourn and to weep for her. Then Abraham got up from beside his dead wife and said to the Hittites, I'm a foreigner and I'm an outsider among you. Give me a burial site among you so that I can bury my dead. And the Hittites replied to Abraham, Listen to us, sir. You are God's chosen one among us. Bury your dead in the finest of the tombs. None of us will withhold this tomb from burying your dead. Then Abraham rose and bowed down before the people of the land, the Hittites. If you are willing for me to bury my dead, he said to them, listen to me. and approach Ipran, son of Zohor, on my behalf, and sell me the cave at Machpelah that belongs to him. It is at the end of his field. Let him sell it to me in your presence for full price, so that I may have it for a burial site. Now Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth. So in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city, Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham, No, my lord, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land and said to Ephron in their presence, If you will please listen to me, I will pay you the price of the field. Accept it from me so that I may bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, Listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. But what is that between me and you? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the standard of the merchants. So Ephron's field at Machpelah near Mamre, the cave that was in it, and all the trees within the boundaries of the field were deeded over to Abraham's possession in the presence of all the Hittites who had come at the gate of the city. After this, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field at Machpelah near Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and its cave were deeded by the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site.
Okay. All right. So we have the unfortunate passing of Sarah.
Yep.
And what comes to your mind, brothers, when y'all reading this?
Well, the first thing that kind of just popped out to me as I was doing the math at today's standards of what a price of silver is.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
Well, if you think about how wealthy Abraham was, you can really get the context. Like, dude, what is 400 pieces of silver between you and me? Like, just bury your dead. Like, why are we talking about this? It was like $3,000 in today's money would be like 400 shekels of silver, something like that.
Yeah.
And for a guy that has 300 servants that are warriors that can go rescue Lot, like, it's nothing.
Dude was wealthy.
He was. Yeah. That's I love how Jubilees puts it in chapter 17. It says that one of the tests of Abraham, that he had 10 tests in his life, and one of the tests was that he was given the wealth of kings. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, he was a wealthy dude. So Ephron, it seemed like it said he was sitting with the other elders of the Hittites at the gates. So at the city gates. So it means, I'm assuming he was one of the elders also. And so therefore he had this land, and they could do this transaction in the sight of the other elders, so that it was accounted for. It was validated. There could be no hearsay. There could be no Ephron later saying, "Oh, I didn't sell that to him." Like, he did it the right way. He didn't want it as a gift. Just like back in Genesis 14, he didn't want to take anything from the king of Sodom as a gift. He wanted, so I think this is interesting that he does this, because we're going to see this also in Ruth, about how there's a transaction of land done amongst the elders of the city so that it's verified properly according to Torah. So whether the Hittites followed Torah or not, they did have the same practices of adjudication, administration, and judgment amongst their elders in how they did real estate transactions. And so I think that's interesting, because this is just him going through the motions properly and doing it with respect. I love how Jubilees says that he was patient in this moment, and it actually talks about how he knew that the Father had already given them this land, and that it was technically his by the word of the Almighty, but yet he was still willing to go through the motions with the Hittites and pay for it for a burial plot, even though he knows he's going to inherit it forever when the kingdom comes. So it's just kind of interesting that he's going through the motions with these people who are traditionally enemies of the covenant of Israel, and so he's still treating them with kindness and patience and patient in spirit to go through these motions to bury his wife. And this cave actually becomes kind of a commonly referenced thing as we go forward in the chapters. Everybody gets buried there. If we could find this cave, guys, cave has got all these patriarchs. Awesome. Wouldn't that be an amazing find?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting is you're talking about, how they're doing Torah, even though they're technically, enemies of his. Clearly, Abraham's behavior towards them his character was that he was upright and just and treated them fairly, because at the beginning, when he asked, they're like, nobody would deny you. What do you want? So clearly the relationship that he has with them, even though they're outside of Torah, is such that when you're abiding in the commandments and obeying God, like, it's attractive to the world. So yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
they
great
called
example
him.
of loving your enemies in this chapter with Abraham.
Yeah, it really is. And they did seem to have a good amount of respect for him. They called him a great man. So that's they acknowledged that he was. Well, of course, we read last portion last week that he had those interactions with Abimelech, the king of Gerar, one of the Philistine kings, and that they had made a pact together to not interfere with each other's business over this well. And so that's interesting. So I wonder if word traveled throughout the area that, hey, the king of Gerar respects this guy, gave him a whole bunch of cattle and wealth and things. So yeah, it's interesting.
Is that the original word of mouth marketing?
Exactly, right? Spread throughout the land like, who's this dude, this sojourner standing in our land that came over from Chaldea, and he's
watch out for that guy.
Yeah, for real. His God is with him, man. He's amazing. So Matthew, what about you? Any thoughts that come to mind?
I just been sharing them periodically, sprinkling them in. So I mean, y'all covered it pretty good.
All right. Well, would you like to take chapter 24?
Certainly.
All right.
Verse 1. By now Abraham was old and well along in years, and Yahweh had blessed him in every way. So Abraham instructed the chief servant of his household, who managed all he owned. Place your hand under my thigh. I always think this is an interesting custom that they had back then, but I'm sure we'll discuss at the end. And I will have you swear by Yahweh, the Elohim of heaven and the Elohim of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I have dwelling, but will go to my country and my kindred, and to take a wife for my son Isaac. The servant asked him, what if the woman is unwilling to follow me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham replied, make sure that you do not take my son back there. Yahweh, the Elohim of heaven, who brought me from my father's house and my native land, who spoke to me and promised me on oath, saying, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you so that you can take a wife for my son from there. And if the woman is unwilling to follow you, then you are released from this oath of mine. Only do not take my son back there. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of his master, Abraham, and swore an oath to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed with all manner of good things from his master in hand, and he set out for Nahor's hometown in Aram Naharaim. As evening approached, he made the camels kneel down near the well outside the town at the time when the woman went out to draw water. Oh, Yahweh, Elohim of my master Abraham, he prayed, please grant me success today and show kindness to my master Abraham. Here I am standing beside the spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. Now, may it happen that the girl to whom I say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who responds, drink, and I will water your camels as well. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Before the servant had finished praying, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. Now the girl was very beautiful, a virgin who had not had relations with any man. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up again. So the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me have a little water from your jar. Drink, my master, she replied. And she quickly lowered her jar to her hands and gave him a drink. After she had given him a drink, she said, I will also draw water for your camels until they had enough to drink. And she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw water until she had drawn water for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man watched her silently to see whether or not Yahweh had made his journey a success. And after the camels had finished drinking, he took out a gold ring weighing a beka and 2 gold bracelets for her wrist weighing 10 shekels. Whose daughter are you? He asked. Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She replied, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son that Milcah bore to Nahor. Then she added, "We have plenty of straw and feed, as well as a place for you to spend the night." Then the man bowed down and worshipped Yahweh, saying, Blessed be Yahweh Elohim of my master Abraham, who has not withheld his kindness and faithfulness from my master. As for me, he has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relatives." The girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he rushed out to the man at the spring. As soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists and heard Rebekah's words, the man said this to me. He went out and found the man standing by the camels near the spring. "Come, you who are blessed by Yahweh," said Laban. "Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So the man came to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and feed were brought to the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of his companions. Then a meal was set before the man, but he said, "I will not eat until I have told you what I came to say." So Laban said, "Please speak. I am Abraham's servant," he said. "Yahweh has greatly blessed my master, and he has become rich. He has given him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, men servants and maidservants, camels and donkeys. My master's wife, Sarah, has borne him a son in her old age, and my master has given him everything he owns. My master made me swear an oath and said, 'You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my kindred to take a wife for my servant.' Then I asked my master, 'What if the woman will not come back with me?' And he told me, 'Yahweh, before whom I have walked, will send his angel with you and make your journey a success, so that you may take a wife for my son, from my kindred, and from my father's house. And when you go to my kindred, if they refuse to give her to you, then you will be released from my oath.' So when I came to the spring today, I prayed, 'Oh, Yahweh Elohim, my master Abraham, if only you would make my journey a success. Here I am standing beside this spring. Now, if a maiden comes out to draw water, and I say, "Please let me drink a little water from your jar," and she replies, "Drink, and I will draw water for your camels as well," may she be the woman Yahweh has appointed for my master's son." And before I had finished praying in my heart, there was Rebekah coming out with her jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew water. So I said to her, "Please give me a drink." She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, "Drink, and I will water your camels as well." So I drank, and she also watered the camels. Then I asked her, "Whose daughter are you?" She replied, "The daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him." So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrist. Then I bowed down and worshiped Yahweh, and I blessed Yahweh, the Elohim, my master Abraham, who led me on the right road to take my granddaughter of my master's brother for his son. Now, if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me, but if not, let me know, so that I may go elsewhere." Laban and Bethuel answered, "This is from Yahweh. We have no choice in the matter. Rebekah is here before you. Take her and go and let her become the wife of your master's son, just as Yahweh has decreed." When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed down to the ground before Yahweh. Then he brought out jewels of silver and gold and articles of clothing, and he gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious gifts to her brother and her mother. Then he and the men with him ate and drank and spent the night there. When they got up the next morning, he said, "Send me on my way to my master." But her brother and mother said, "Let the girl remain with us 10 days or so. After that, she may go." But he replied, "Do not delay me, since Yahweh has made my journey a success. Send me on my way so that I may go to my master." So they said, "We will call the girl and ask her opinion." They called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" "I will go," she replied. So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, along with her nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the gates of their enemies." Then Rebekah and her servant girls got ready, mounted the camels, and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and left. Now Isaac had just returned from Be'er Lahai Roi, for he was living in the Negev. Early in the evening, Isaac went out to the field to meditate, and looking up, he saw the camels approaching.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that, Matthew.
That was a long one.
chapter.
Yeah.
It was.
I need a sip of water after that one.
Yeah, there's this is a big chapter. There's a lot in here to mention, and
Yeah, a lot of meat in that one.
yeah, there sure is. Josh, what comes to your mind, brother, after reading this?
I've got a couple notes that I wrote down when I read through this last night. Actually, the first thing that really is kind of interesting. Well, first of all, I love what you said. I'm glad we don't make oths like that anymore. I prefer the handshake other than putting.
Man, brother.
Right.
My dad and I were talking about that this morning when we read through it. But now, what I find is interesting is when Abraham is telling the servant, go do this, and the servant's like, "Well, what happens if it doesn't work out?" Abraham says, God's going to send an angel of the Lord ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does God warn Abraham ahead of time somewhere and say, "Hey, by the way, I'm doing this," so he knows? Does Abraham make that request of God? Does he just speak because he knows God's character? Like, how does he know to make that statement? That seems like a very unique thing of, "Oh, don't worry, God's going to send his angel ahead of you. It's going to be successful. You're good." How do you know that?
So you're talking about here in verse 7, because it mentions it twice, and then the servant repeats it while telling the story to Laban and Bethuel. By the way, do you guys think that this servant is Eliezer?
I didn't give it any thought. I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah, because that's who he said he was going to give it to before Isaac was born. So
yeah, because this is the servant. He said that he managed his whole household.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just guessing it's maybe Eliezer. I just always been curious why it never names the servant in this particular chapter.
That's an interesting thought. Interesting idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. In verse 7, it's a curious way that Abraham would encourage the servant to say, "No, he being Yahweh will send his angel before you, so you can take a wife for my son from there." He goes on to say that as well in the retelling of this, because in verse 24. No. And so in verse 2, well, this is kind of adding to, this is one of the questions I had, adding to your thought, is in verse 26. It says, "Then the man bowed down and worshiped the Lord, saying, Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who was not withheld his kindness and faithfulness. As for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relatives." So okay, so that's one time he bowed down. But then when he meets Rebecca and realizes who she is and that she's qualifying for this position, so to speak, because of her behavior, he does it again in verse
48, I think.
Is it 48?
Yeah, you have it highlighted in the notes.
Yeah, so in verse 48, he's like, he bows down again and worships the Lord and says, "He led me on the right road to take the granddaughter of my master's brother for his son." So, crazy question, guys. Was Abraham just speaking spiritually, or was Abraham serious when he said, "Yahweh will send his angel to go before you"?
The more I'm reading the Bible, the more I'm thinking stuff is literal. So I'm going to say there was literally an angel that went ahead of him to prepare him.
Do we see any other examples, something like this in scriptures?
I mean, me and my wife are reading the Balaam and Balak story earlier today, and that's a literal messenger. So
that is right.
That's similar.
I think we get caught up in the semantics of the English translated word for the word before, and sometimes we think before means chronologically ahead of.
It hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
As opposed to, this guy's going to lead you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're before Yahweh, that means you're standing in his presence, right? If he goes before you, just like the Exodus 23, Yahweh says to Moses and all the Israelites, "I'm going to send my angel before you, ahead of you, to clear out the way." So that was a literal angel. It was the one that we saw in the bush. It's the one that is leading them as the cloud by day, pillar by fire, at night.
Mm-hmm.
That was a literal angel.
So could Abraham see that? Did God reveal that to him? Did he just know, like, I'm making a request of God. He loves me. He's going to do this for me. Like,
so there's a book that used to be in the canon of the American canon that was taken out around the 1880s. It's a book called the Book of Tobit. And it's about a guy from Naphtali who was taken into exile by the Assyrian kings in approximately 720 BC. Naphtali was the first tribe to be invaded by Assyria when the northern house was invaded and scattered. And he goes on a journey, or he sends his son Tobias to go on a journey, and there's an angel that's sent with him to make the journey a success. So for 14 days, Tobias and an angel go on this trip from one town to another in Mede, Persia, to accomplish this journey.
Yeah.
I haven't read Tobit in a while. I need to refresh on that.
So
one.
is it possible that Abraham was very literal in this case, saying, yeah, he'll go ahead and make sure this is a successful trip for you. And there's an angel that actually went with him.
Well, you can almost kind of see the confidence as soon as with it maybe is Eliezer or whoever is the servant. As soon as he sits down, he gets to the well. He's like, all right, Lord, here's my test. This is what I want to happen. If this is the woman that you want to give me, then have her say this. And she does it exactly. And he doesn't, the confidence that servant has, like when I think about when people talk about, you got to go before and have faith when you make a request of the Lord. If I text my dad and say, hey, can you bring me something? I don't wonder if he's going to show up or not. Like I know that he's going to show up. You know what I mean? And like that same kind of confidence that I would have if I was talking to somebody here on earth is what it seems like he has here. He's like, all right, Lord, this is the sign I want. I know you're going to do it. Oh, hey, look, you did. Cool. Like he has this weird confidence as if it is more literal,
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting, and it's a shame that this particular passage or this story is not paralleled in Jubilees. That would be fun to get some extra detail, but it's not. So all we get is this account from Genesis. And it seems as if there's lots of stories in Genesis that doesn't give you all the details. It's like, it's just giving you enough, right? It's just trying to communicate something quickly. Clearly there's a lot more details to the story because, that's a multiple day journey from the Negev up to this place of Aram, to this area where Laban and Bethuel were. So it's clearly like a journey, and things happened along that journey that we don't hear about. All we hear about is by the time he gets to this well and sees Rebecca coming up to get some water. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of interesting that I guess I'm just trying to share for the audience to think about. Yeah. We're not denigrating the scriptures. We're just saying in all of scripture, we only get a small sliver of interaction and conversation. They can't, like, if they wrote down everything, guys, the book would be an entire library. It'd be volumes and volumes and volumes of writing down every detail and every conversation spoken with every person involved. They don't do that. It just highlights on certain things. So, but the idea, when I find it curious, I see these hintings at an actual person being in the backdrop with this servant because he's actually bowing down to somebody. Now, I know that some people will say, well, Sean, what if he was just excited and he's just bowing down? Like he's just saying, oh, praise you, Yahweh, bows down to heaven, but then bows down on the ground as an outward open show. Very possible. He could have done that. Yeah. I just see that mixed with Abraham saying he's going to send an angel before you. So that seems kind of strange.
So Sean, are you saying that the same way that the angels that appeared when they were getting ready to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah as men, are you thinking that one of the people in the caravan with this servant would have looked just like a man, but was in fact an angel of the presence? Or are you thinking that more kind of like Balaam, where he didn't see it until the donkey? Like,
I'm thinking more like Tobit, where the angel is literally walking with the servant, leading the caravan and telling him which road to take, which is why he says he led me on the right road.
It might be similar to when Sarah made the Most High a cheeseburger, pretty much. And there was a couple messengers there, so I think it's pretty similar. I think those are literal too.
Yeah. So think about the landscape. Think about ancient landscapes as far as, they don't have major highways with all these signs telling you which suburb community to go into. Yep. But guys, these cities back then and these establishments of areas where people lived, they weren't cookie cutter suburban households, but they were large cities with a collection of people living in close proximity to each other or having land to some degree on the outskirts, just like we do today. This is why many of the cities had fortified walls around them, and there was a large concentrated amount of people living in the city-state enclosed area versus the farmers who lived on the outskirts who managed large pieces of land. The wells there's not just one well for the entire northern region of Israel or Samaria, right? There's multiple wells. So that means you have to know the right road to get to the right well, which is close enough to Laban's house for Rebecca to run over and get some water. So it is a true statement for Laban to be like, without having a map and having never been here before, for him to be like, oh, the Lord led me on the right road.
Mm-hmm.
So I know a lot of people in the audience might maybe want to make a mistake, maybe want to make the argument to say, Sean, you're mistaken, to think that there could possibly be a literal angel sent before him, like Abraham mentions, to lead him on the right way to find his family. And that's okay. It's just my theory, as far as I see so much angelic interaction in the scriptures all the time.
Yep.
And like we talked about in the last couple of weeks, where there was angelic interaction. We're going to see another example of this in chapter 25 that I'd like to talk about as well. So I just think it's a shame that if there was an actual angelic interaction, this is their job, right? Hebrews 1:14, they're ministering servants sent by the Father to help those who are inheriting salvation. Well, this angel, if it's a literal angel in this story, he's helping the servant accomplish his mission. This servant has been circumcised and grafted in with Abraham. He's a part of Israel in the covenant. He's going to inherit salvation. So all the qualifiers fit,
Yep.
So this is why I would think it seems as if there's another guy here. He just doesn't have any dialogue in this story,
And it's a high stakes event. I mean,
yeah.
If we don't get the right woman, then that changes all the genes and DNA of every person underneath there. So like, it would make sense that if that's their purpose,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. And then of course, where's the other one? What do you guys think? Well, I think I actually have. Oh, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. Verse 62, where it talks about that word that's really hard to say, Matthew, that bir lahahare roy.
Yeah. I'm normally pretty good with Hebrew words, but that one was tough.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I think we got that last portion, or the portion before, with Ishmael and how he went and settled near this place. So that Hagar and Ishmael had settled near this place because its Hebrew word means the Lord who sees.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is interesting that Isaac had returned from there. Was he visiting Ishmael? I don't know. But I mean, Jubilees 22 says that both Ishmael and Isaac showed up together to celebrate Shavuot, and which is when Abraham died. And so they came to see Abraham right before he died, and they came together. So I don't know. It's just interesting that we could have a little hinting in here of Isaac still maintaining some sort of relationship as just coming back from visiting Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do you want to touch on the thigh custom before we go to the next chapter?
Yeah,
I always thought that's every time I've done a Torah portion, read this, I always thought that's a very interesting custom. And like Josh said, I'm glad we don't do that anymore.
What do you think is happening? Like someone's sitting down, and then someone comes up and put their hands under their thigh.
Yeah, it seemed like just sticking underneath there, like, all right, like, kind of stuck at your mercy here. Like, what are we doing?
Oh man,
because it does seem kind of like an intimate thing between two dudes.
Oh yes,
right? That
put your hand where it's normally not.
Right? Yeah, like I always make jokes about with my wife about the back of my knees, being sensitive. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I can't. I can only let her hands go back there. I wouldn't want another man's hands being right back there.
I think we're in agreement on that.
Amen, brother.
Yes, I'm definitely glad we just do handshakes and written legal documents nowadays.
Or nuts.
Yeah. Just pound it, Abraham.
Yeah.
I don't need to put my hand under your thigh. It's fine. No, I don't know. I honestly don't know the back history as far as the implications or the symbolism as what that stands for. Have you guys heard anything on that?
I don't know, but I know it was a serious thing, a serious agreement, a covenant, if you want to call it that too. So
well, we see it
behind it.
We see it in a couple other places too. But
yeah, interesting custom.
Yes,
so guys, just real quick, I have here on the summary that just for those studying at home, Abraham sends his house manager to find a bride for Isaac from amongst his family in Aram, north of the land of Canaan. The man takes animals and expensive gifts to give the girl he finds for Isaac. The man meets Rebekah, Abraham's brother's granddaughter, at the town well. This is apparently where all you go find women. It's like the watering hole, literally the watering hole outside of town. She displays a servant's heart by drawing water for him and his animals. The man gives Rebekah the expensive gifts. The man asks to stay overnight at Rebekah's father's house as a guest. The man meets Rebekah's father Bethuel and her brother Laban and tells them why he has taken this journey. Rebekah's father believes the request is favored by God and agrees to give Rebekah to Isaac. So I thought it was interesting that he gave those gifts to Rebekah, the bracelets and the stuff, that because he's choosing her, right? And there doesn't, the dialogue given us in this chapter, there's not a lot of dialogue as a interview. If this is an interview, there's not a lot happening other than she's willing to draw water for him. But I thought it's interesting that the text says that she hurried to draw water for him and then hurried to draw water for his animals. And so to me, this is a servant's heart of Torah. This is actually something I read in loose description in Proverbs 31 when it describes a righteous woman. So I thought that was interesting. That could have been why he was impressed with this particular person. And then lo and behold, it's actually family. He didn't know it. And so he's even a greater surprise.
Well, and two, I mean, you think about it. I don't know how much water a camel drinks, but it's a lot of stinking water. And there was 10 camels. So like, it wasn't like this minor task where it was going to take her 15 minutes worth of work. Like that was probably a couple of hours worth of work of drawing water out to.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't like it was this minor thing that he was saying. He was asking like, average person's like, oh my gosh, I got all my other duties and now I got to feed these 10 camels too. Holy cow, I was not ready for that today, but yeah, sure, I'll do it. That kind of attitude versus, oh yeah, no, sure, let me get your camels as well. That just goes to her heart because it was a pretty large task.
Yeah, there's people in the audience in the live chat asking if Rebecca was 10 years old. I think that's taken from the book of Jasher. I don't know how I feel about that as far as that claim, or it could be taken from other rabbinical writings. I can't remember exactly where people make that claim, but I've never seen that. Jubilees doesn't say that. Genesis doesn't say that. I don't think personally, and we're going to read about this later with Ruth, is why I'm about to make this statement. But I personally don't think that she was that young of a girl. And I don't think that that young of a girl was sent out by herself to go draw water from a family. So because of the customs of the time of young girl being caught in the field by herself. So I think she was much older and of marrying age. And I don't think she was that young, but I personally, I'm not in huge favor of Jasher and some of its claims, but we'll be reviewing those in depth on Honor of Kings here in a few months when we have a chance to get to that. So, ultimately, is there anything else in this chapter, guys, that sparked your thoughts? Your attention?
Yeah, let me say one more thing before we go on to 25. This is I guess one of the original examples in Torah and Scripture where somebody's like, "Hey, Abba, can you give me a sign, please?"
Putting out the fleece.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Interesting story. If dating sites would be, bankrupt if this happened to everybody, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting. We're going to see, we got the introduction of Laban, Rebecca's brother. I think we're going to see him in later portions, how he unfolds. That's his first interaction with Abraham's family, that part of the extended family that he's a part of, to see that, oh, here comes our wealthy Abraham, remote extended Abraham down the Negev, sent his servant up with all this wealth to give and take my sister. And so later we're going to see he interacts with his sister's son, Jacob, and his character is fully on display at that point. So it's interesting. He's getting that first introduction, like, oh, here's the rich part of our family showed up. You know what I mean? So
Cha-ching.
Yeah, he keeps his mouth shut during this event, but later down the road, he reveals some different characters. So it's interesting. Just keep in mind for future portions. But other than that, if there's nothing else on this one, I'll get to 25.
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a look here at Genesis 25, 1-6. It says, now Abraham had taken another wife named Keturah. She bore him Zimron, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were the Asherites, the Letushites, and the Leumites. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanak, or Enoch, Abida, Eldai. I don't know. I should have given one of you guys this chapter.
Come on now.
I got you back, Sean.
All these were descendants of Keturah. Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. But while he was still alive, Abraham gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. Abraham lived a total of 175 years, and at a ripe old age he breathed his last and died, old and contented, and was gathered to his people. His son Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite. This was the field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites. Abraham was buried there with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who lived near Bir Lahairoi. This is the account of Abraham's son Ishmael, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael in the order of their birth. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, then Kedar, Abdiel, Mibsam, Mishma. These guys are just making up words. Can you imagine the baby comes out and you're like, he's Mishma. Let's name him Mishma. No. Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tima, Jeter, Nafish, or Napish, I don't know, Kedima. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these were their names by their villages and encampments, 12 princes of their tribes. Ishmael lived a total of 137 years. Then he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. Ishmael's descendants settled from the Havilah to the Shur, which is near the border of Egypt as you go towards Asher. And they lived in hostility toward all their brothers. This is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Padan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean. Later, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and the Lord heard his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. But the children inside her struggled with each other, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So Rebekah went to inquire of the Lord, and he declared to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other. The older will serve the younger." When her time came to give birth, there were indeed twins in her womb. The first one came out red, covered with hair like a fur coat, so they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. When the boys grew up, Isaac became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. Because Isaac had a taste for wild game, he loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. One day, while Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the field and was famished. He said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am famished." That is why he was also called Edom. "First, sell me your birthright," Jacob replied. "Look," said Esau, "I'm about to die, so what good is a birthright to me?" "Swear to me first," Jacob said. So Esau swore to Jacob and sold him the birthright. Then Jacob gave some bread and lentil stew to Esau, who ate and drank, and then got up and went away. Thus, Esau despised his birthright. All right. So we have a ton of things in this chapter, guys.
Mm-hmm.
All I got to say is that better have been some good stew.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and I actually did a show on this several months back. One of our patrons had asked a question about the interactions with Jacob, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, and all this. And I tried to give a breakdown of as far as the use of the terminology of the birthright and the firstborn and the blessing and the differentiations between what that looked like versus the passing on of the priesthood versus passing on gifts of inheritance, physical property and gifts. So this is where the birthright or the firstborn usually pertain to the priesthood. This is why the prophecy was to Rebekah, the elder will serve the younger, because the one being served was usually the high priest of the family. He became that eldership of the family and also attained the priest position, because the priest was a position of rulership. And
that kind of makes sense as to why, we talk about Esau, doing evil amongst the Lord of God, loved Jacob, he hated Esau. If he was giving up his priesthood for just a bowl of lentil soup, that shows he really didn't care about it. He's like, I don't care about this stupid thing. Like, I just give you some soup here, I'm hungry. Like, that really goes to his heart.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is why the parallel account in Jubilees is so important for this story, because it explains that Abraham, when he was still alive, he noticed that Esau was not one that was prone to do the ways of Yahweh, and that Jacob was.
Yep.
That Jacob was actually the one who had the heart to learn the ways of Yahweh and practice them, even as a young man. Esau was just learning the ways of war, going out hunting. He was just out there trying to be a manly man, and he wasn't really. Whereas Jacob had actually learned writing and was showing that he had a propensity to learn the commandments. Which, if you're going to be a priest, it's important you have to know writing, because a part of your job was to be a scribe, so you could copy the scrolls and pass them on. So Yeah.
But Moses hasn't been born yet. There's nothing written.
Right. And people are in the live chat asking, it's going to be in Jubilees 19 through 21. So go read those 3 chapters and they'll give you a full breakdown of this interaction of time where Abraham actually pulls Rebekah aside and tells her, yeah, Jacob is the one that's going to take over my seed on the earth, not Esau. And he's saying this because it says he saw that Isaac had favored Esau, but that wasn't correct because Esau wasn't showing the propensity to take over the priesthood. So this is why he pulls Rebekah aside and says, make sure Jacob gets the priesthood. Then we get this crazy story next week, right? About Jacob going in before Isaac and stealing the blessing. Well, yeah, there's a reason for that. So, and there's a reason why Isaac, as the patriarch of this house, of the family, just didn't say, once he figured out that he was tricked, just didn't say, oh no, that doesn't apply, give it to Esau. He let Jacob remain having it because he knew. He just
that's probably what should have happened.
Yeah, sometimes men just need their wives to help them a little bit with certain things that they're not noticing. My lovely wife is great at that. Yeah,
mine too.
I'll be looking for the help someday.
Yeah, it'll come your way. It'll come your way in the future. Let me show you guys something real quick. We go through part of this. There's something I wanted to point out. That's we got many of the sons of Keturah. So we have 6 more sons born to Keturah, and there's a lot of grandsons that are born out of that. And at the bottom here in verse 5, right before Abraham dies, in the book of Jubilees, it also says the same thing, that he gave his gifts to the sons of his concubines. So that means if Hagar and Keturah are considered concubines because they're second and third wives, then their sons, these 6 sons and their grandsons, got gifts of inheritance from Abraham before he died, and so did Ishmael, and of course Isaac got the majority of
he got everything.
Right? Yeah, he got the bigger portion, but the other guys did get gifts. Someone brought this up one time because they're like, "Oh, Abraham disobeyed Torah because he didn't give anything to the other children." I'm like, no, it says it right here in Jubilees. In fact, he actually calls them before he gives them these gifts in Jubilees. It says he teaches them, or he joins them, he encourages them to keep the commandments, and kind of reminds them of the Torah. And I think that's fascinating.
If you want this to multiply, this is a behavior you should abide in. This is how I got it. This is how you can get more.
Exactly. A lot of babies in that family.
Yeah, it reminds me of like some churches or a John 3:16 mission that does the free food, and they make you listen to the sermon before you get the free food.
Yeah.
He's like, he calls all the grandchildren for the dispersion of the will, and he's like, now before I hand out all this stuff and you guys just run away, let me tell you, let me go ahead and preach at you real quick about what you need to be doing, keep the commandments of the Lord.
Oh man,
seriously, Dad. Yeah. So, and then of course we get another little instance in here where he's buried in that same cave that he bought. Or a lot of people are going to be buried in this cave. Do you guys think that his wife at the time, Keturah, do you guys think that she got a little salty when he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go be buried next to Sarah"?
I'm sure there's a lot of things that happened with multiple spouses together and all that I don't want to. That wasn't fun for a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, it got bad when I had that baby making contest in the family.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll call you, and I got another one. I'll raise you.
Yeah, you talking about Rachel and Leah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Sarah sending away I can't think of her name off the top of my head right now.
Hagar.
Hagar, when she does become pregnant, is like Sarah's idea, and then it did happen. Oh, dang it, get her out of here.
Get out of here.
But what's interesting though, and maybe you're getting ready to go here, is that Isaac and Ishmael together come to bury Abraham. I mean, you kind of touched on that a second ago. But
it seems like, again, on verse 11, to your point, like I was mentioning last chapter, it seems like Isaac is living near where Ishmael lives at this Bir Lahai-Roi place. And that he keeps coming from there. And it says he lives near him there in this passage. So I'm thinking that he had some constant interaction with Ishmael. I mean, he's his brother,
Yeah.
And he's his older brother.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I know that growing up, with just traditional teaching, I thought negatively of Ishmael But
Right.
now that I've just read the text, there's nothing in there that shows that he's not someone to be respected. He wasn't probably blessed. And even God himself says, doesn't the angel of the Lord say that he's going to bless him when he's with his mom Hagar alone and they think they're going to die?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And this is why I agree with you. I always heard growing up too that Ishmael was kind of like the child, because of what it says that he lives in contention around his brothers.
mhm.
And I thought to myself, well, that's unfortunate, because Jubilee says that he was coming back to keep the feasts with Abraham and Isaac.
Yep.
And so sure, he may have had some contention with other people he lived around that was different family, but from what I see, his interaction with Abraham and Isaac, he's cool with them, and he's keeping the commandments. And so, and his get the promise that all of his 12 sons are going to be made into a great nation.
Yeah.
So,
and as you just said a second ago, he was keeping the commandments, right? He was coming for the feast days. So,
yeah.
Sean, I got a question.
Sure.
What translation version are in your slide?
This is the Berean Study Bible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed in verse 1 with all the names.
Yeah.
One of them was Shua. I think it was the last mentioned in verse 2. So I was like, oh, maybe that's the same Hebrew letters as the end of our Messiah's names, but it's actually a het at the end. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's pretty close. Like one letter off.
Well, yeah, Hebrew is really interesting how that, one little tweak can change everything. Like, we talk about that lentil stew, and it talks about how Esau is also called Edom. Well, red stew, the dirt of the earth, is considered Adamah, which means red dirt. So therefore he added on instead of Esau, he added on Edom, and then suddenly it becomes, because of the red stew, he's also nicknamed Edom, right? Which is a mixture of this word for red and Esau's name. So, I just think that that's interesting how the language works like that. Doesn't
That's
do
very
that
close to Adam too.
Right. A man pulled from the dirt, from the red man pulled from the dirt. Yeah. So it is interesting that that the language works like that. What else did I want to talk about in this particular chapter that stuck out to me? What about you guys? Anything stick out to you guys?
It was interesting. What's the verse where it has there's two in your womb? I know that's early in the chapter. I don't remember which verse it was. Two nations.
Well, you said she went to go inquire of the Lord.
Yeah.
I have an idea, and I'm curious to see what you might say about.
Well, this particular passage actually is going to bring us into one of our segments. All right. So, guys, this is a great question, right? It is this passage where she's feeling the two twins in her belly struggling. It says she goes to inquire of the Lord, and then she gets this prophecy about the two twins inside of her room, or the explanation in the prophecy about the two twins inside of her. So where did she go to ask the Lord about her pregnancy?
We good?
Are we still here?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Now we're back. I think you cut out for a second. You asked the question, where did she go?
Yes. The question is, where did Rebecca go to ask the Lord about her pregnancy?
So I have an idea, just based off of some of your other teachings and different locations, is that she went to Mount Sinai. That would have been a long journey for someone who's pregnant, but it's just a thought.
Okay. What about you, Matthew?
I'm not sure, but that's interesting what Josh shared.
Okay.
I have to meditate on that.
Well, I personally think it's much shorter of a journey. I think that Rebecca being married to Isaac and seeing where Isaac was dwelling near this area, and Isaac having been, the moment that Abraham dies, it says that Isaac is given the blessing of the Lord. This is the passing on of the priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
So what does a priest do?
Ministers before God on behalf of the people.
And what did that look like?
And or family.
What did that look like in a practical manner? What did in the Old Testament we see? If Yahweh doesn't change, his ways are consistent. What did Aaron do when Aaron ministered before the Lord? What does that look like? What did he do?
Sacrifices, burned incense.
So he went up to an altar
Mhm.
at a place where the Lord had chosen to put his name.
Yep.
Right. And that altar had to be built in a certain way. He brought certain ingredients. He brought certain animals, and he did it in a certain fashion to minister atonement for folks, or to minister thank offerings or praise offerings or vow offerings or first fruit offerings, or whatever the occasion, right? Whatever the context was. What was at that place where he chose to put his name that validated those offerings?
His fire.
Okay. But what was in that fire?
The angel of the presence.
That's right. So when in Aaron's day, when they had the tabernacle, and they had the pillar of fire by day, cloud by day, pillar of fire by night, hovering over the mercy seat above the presence of the Lord. Remember when Nadab and Abihu, they brought strange fire?
Yeah.
And then fire shot out and killed them?
Yeah. So
are we to believe that it was just magical fire coming out from the altar? Well, no, because the altar that was burning was the one where they made the sacrifices outside in the courtway, as opposed to in the inner Holy of Holies area. So above the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies area was where this angel hovered and hung out, and the one that also descended in the tent of meeting to speak with Moses face to face.
So are you saying that that there's an altar before there was the tabernacle, that there's an altar where the angel of presence stayed that Rebecca could have gone to?
So a few hundred years before Aaron was born, and before we get that whole story in Exodus, we have the same priesthood is already intact. The same Torah is already being followed. There's angels showing up everywhere in the Old Testament. We have, if our idea about Abraham being a priest as well, as Jubilees tells us he was, passed it down to Isaac passed it down to Jacob gives it to Levi. So they're ministering before something. So
basically, does she just, I'm just trying to follow here because this is new to me. So if she follows, so would she just essentially be going to her husband, who was the high priest, that's while he's actually officiating, doing the religious ceremonies in the presence of the angel of the presence, to say, hey, what the heck is going on here? And so instead of it being like, I always had envisioned that she would just kind of pray and that God gave her a vision or a dream, whereas she's actually right there, and the angel of the presence is like, okay, let me tell you what's going on.
Yeah, if it had said, she had a vision in her sleep and the angel spoke to her and said that, then that would have been easy, right? But it didn't say that.
Yep.
It said that she went to go inquire of the Lord.
What's the chapter in Genesis where Abraham was making the offerings and he built an altar?
Oh, several different. Chapter 12, chapter 17, chapter 22. I mean, yeah, there's.
So you think she went to one of those altars?
Well, that's because he had moved around to different places.
Yeah.
And he established an altar of unhewn stone at the new place that he was going to stay for a while. But because basically, guys, it's explaining to us that he's engaging in a traveling tabernacle.
So you think that's where she went, to one of those altars?
I think she went to Isaac, her husband, who was the high priest of the covenant, and he's ministering before an altar that's been honored and dedicated by the Lord via an angel of the presence, just as we see throughout the rest of the scriptures. Do you guys, I don't know if you saw a couple weeks ago when I had Marlo on, and we were talking about in Jeremiah, in Ezekiel chapter 8 and 9, that the angel of the presence that's over the temple actually moved and got up to go do judgment at one point.
Yep.
He was still there. Same angel of the presence that was there during the days of Moses and Aaron. It's the same angel. He's the one that makes that sacrifice get accepted. He's the one that oversees everything that's happening to make sure it's being done right. This is why Yahweh warns him in Exodus 23. Dude, he will not, don't play with this guy. He will not, forgive your transgressions. He's not here for that. He's here to oversee that you guys do these things as I've commanded you. Right. So the angels are their own priesthood. So there's like hierarchical levels of accountability that we're seeing here between the regular layperson that goes before the high priest of mankind, who's supposed to be very righteous. He's supposed to be doing the Torah properly, so that he can then in turn mediate for that transgression of that regular man on behalf to God. But since we're not in the temple in heaven like Yeshua is now, and we don't just get to directly look at the face of the Almighty, there's another mediator in between the high priest on earth and the God of heaven, and that's his angels he sends to facilitate this process, just like we see in the days of Exodus through Deuteronomy. So all I'm trying to say, guys, is I think it's been in here the whole time. We have the same Torah being followed before Mount Sinai. I think dispensational theology, and yes, Judaism does teach a version of just dispensational theology by saying that the Torah wasn't given until Sinai. And you're like, oh, come on now.
Yeah, you can see that's not true in the next chapter, verse 5.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, literally, we got Cain and Abel bringing first fruits in Genesis chapter 4.
Yeah.
So,
There's
what I'm saying? I'm like, guys, this is the Lord who changes not. We're talking about the Almighty. His character, his ways of right behavior doesn't change ever. And nor would it in regards to how he's set up a priesthood and a temple and an altar to minister atonement for sin. So Isaac is the high priest. His wife comes to him. They together, in my understanding, would go to either that. Okay, so there's two options here. All right, because we're not even talking about the Urim and the Thummim. What the high priest was supposed to have. It says in Jubilees 32 that Jacob, who'd been given the priesthood from Isaac, when he gives his priesthood position to Levi, says he takes off the breastplate and the garments of the priesthood to give them to Levi. Does that mean he also had pockets in his breastplate and had the Urim and the Thummim like Aaron had?
I would think so.
I know, it's crazy, right? And so when I'm studying through this and I'm sitting there going, okay, I know that the Father's ways are consistent. He's asking Abraham to do the same behavior that he asked Moses and Aaron and all the Israelites later. So why would the administration of the priesthood be different? The Father doesn't preach dispensation theology.
No.
So why, if he's building an altar, which he would have had to make it of unhewn stones, and he would also is bringing the right ingredients, as we talked about last week. Jubilees 21 even details the right ingredients. In fact, Jubilees 21 gives you a speckle of detail that even Genesis through Deuteronomy doesn't, explaining that Abraham knew exactly the type of wood that he was supposed to gather from the forest to use for the sacrifice. We never get that instruction in Genesis through Deuteronomy. And it's interesting that there was like 5 different types of wood you could use, and you couldn't use any other types. So I think that's interesting, because I've always wondered, why is it called a sweet and pleasing aroma? Because if some wood is not a sweet and pleasing aroma, right?
Well, if you've ever smoked any meats, I mean, there's people they swear by, I smoke my ribs with pecan wood, or, oh no, you got to use hickory, or, oh no, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So I think that it's interesting. It's very possible they just simply went to the angel of the presence that was already there. This is the same angel of the presence that Abraham would have said, hey, Father said he's going to send this angel, or the angel of the presence told me he's going to go with you. Meaning the Almighty has given permission to that angel to go with the servant to go make sure they found the right kinsman to bring back a wife for Isaac.
So just thinking about this, if Abraham and the priesthood, we're talking about this angel of the Lord, the angel of the presence, it seems to me like he was kind of always around then, like the way he was but because they didn't have the tabernacle, he would just be in wherever the place was that they were currently offering sacrifices that the Lord had kind of approved. Before we see, okay, so then that brings up another question. Then you had made a comment a second ago that there was, different levels of mediation. And so now that Yeshua is our high priest, we don't need the angel of the presence anymore, because Yeshua can go right to the Father on our behalf, and we can go right to Yeshua. That's like the extra benefit and
we get the shortcut.
Okay.
Yeah. The Torah is still being followed, but because earlier there was no man that could stand in that position of authority above even angels. But as Hebrews 5 tells us, now we have this priest who's ascended through the heavens, who was chosen from amongst mankind. He's just been a glorified man now.
Doesn't Paul say somewhere that we have greater access or something like that? Like that would make perfect sense.
Yeah, it's through Yeshua. Now we have access directly into the throne room, as opposed to Now, don't get me wrong. The angels were faithful in doing their priestly duties to take our prayers before the Father on our behalf. I mean, we even see this in Revelation chapter 5. They're still doing it as a part of their level of priesthood, right? They take the bowls of incense, which represent the prayers of the saints before the Father. But because that was a priestly duty, right? I think it's Exodus chapter 20, chapter 30, that Aaron has to make that certain incense. So, there's this whole process is not taught to us in Sunday school.
No.
Yeah, it's just spiritual. Jesus is our high priest. Okay, what does that mean? Well, he's a high priest. Someone I just saw in the comments said that Jesus is the angel of the presence. I
personally don't. I know some people. It's okay if anyone thinks that, but I personally believe that Yeshua was sent at the appointed time, and that there's lots of scriptures that tell us he was hidden in the bosom of the Father until that appointed time to be revealed to mankind. And so he's not on the earth just walking around doing everything all the time. The Father has billions and trillions of angels that he made to do all this other stuff,
But then in Hebrews, it talks about him being high, greater than the angels. So if he is the angel, how can he also be greater than?
Well, when he was resurrected to a place because of his obedience,
right,
to a position of authority in his priesthood and the Melchizedek order greater than all the angels. You're right. But pre-incarnate, did he come down and do everything on the earth? People also think he was the king of Salem that Abraham paid tithes to back in Genesis 14. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so then Yeshua's birth through Mary wasn't his first coming? So he was already here as a king of the entire nation?
Yeah, I don't buy that one either.
I don't understand. That's not the way these words work. These words have meanings to them, right? So the Father tells us that his son was sent at the fullness of time, and in a certain moment of time appointed for him, not before. You know what I'm saying? So he's got all these other characters he created on day one, these angels, and there are hierarchy of priesthoods to do this stuff, and I mean, we see them interacting all throughout Scripture. So here's another fun question in regards to what we just been talking about with Rebecca. In Genesis 4, Cain and Abel bringing their first fruits. Who they bringing? Who's there making sure that sacrifice is good or not?
Well, that was before. It would have been after sin, so it would have had to have been the angel of the presence, the same one we see this whole way, because it couldn't have been before Yahweh. So, but then also, okay, sorry, there's a couple connections that are happening here. So, but what doesn't Zechariah, when he's in administering and the angel tells him that he's about to have a son, and he's like, I can't have a son, I'm old. He's like, I'm Gabriel, I stand in the presence of God. So doesn't that kind of tell us that the angel of the presence is Gabriel, not Yeshua? Because isn't that the same one that announces to Mary?
Well, there are, according to Enoch, there's 7 angels of the presence. It could have been Gabriel, could have been Michael, could have been Uriel, could have been Phanuel. Depends on who's sent at the time.
Those are specific beings, like they're specific angels. They've got their own names.
Exactly.
So
I mean, the whole book of Jubilees tells us that the angel talking with Moses on Mount Sinai and telling him the back history of the patriarchs and how they kept Torah, that is an angel that he openly says he was the angel that was here and leading him there, and the one that spoke to Noah, and the one that we did this and we did that, and the one that showed up to Abraham, and the one that was in the bush, and like he openly tells him. And we have, the confirmation of that interaction within Jubilees with Paul in Galatians 3:19, with Stephen in Acts 7, verse 30 and verse 53, and also the writer of Hebrews in Hebrews 2:1. It says that the law was mediated, which means explained and expounded upon, or the law was, not mediated, but I can't remember the Greek word in Galatians 3:19 that Paul uses, but the law was ordained. He uses the word ordained as it's translated in English, but the Greek meaning of that means that it was basically explained and taught on Mount Sinai by angels. So we've got Old and New Testament confirmation that this angel of the presence is interacting and helping everywhere all the time. Think about the transition of Moses and Aaron and where they grew up in oppression in Goshen as the new Pharaoh took over, didn't know Joseph, started oppressing the Hebrews, and then takes them into a place. Some of the arguments in Exodus chapter 8 and 9 between the Pharaoh and Moses and Aaron is that the Hebrews were not able to sacrifice in the land of Goshen anymore. So I don't know how long that was taking place, but they had now been restricted by their totalitarian oppressors that they couldn't even worship God the right way, which the whole conversation with Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh was, let us go. Let us go with our animals, our children, all of our people, 2-3 days journey in the wilderness so that we may worship God. Right. So because they couldn't do it in the land of Goshen.
Right.
So now we have a generation in the land of Goshen that has forgotten all the ways that they're supposed to worship God properly.
Yep.
This is why at Mount Sinai, they have to be taught again. They have to
Retaught.
the fullness of the Torah is laid out for them. So because their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, did all these things faithfully. And as a result of their faithfulness, you guys have been saved from your oppressors from the land of Egypt and brought here now. Will you do everything I'm about to tell you? And they all raised their hands, said, everything you tell us, we will do.
They're brave.
For 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. For 5 minutes, we'll do everything you say. Can't promise 5 minutes after that. But so guys, the point I'm trying to make, hopefully people in the audience are seeing this, is that there's consistency.
Mm-hmm.
The Father, his expectation for us has been consistent this whole time. He tells us that this is his behavior, his moral, righteous law and behavior that's how he behaves in heaven. And he gave us that pattern to follow here on the earth. And this is what he wants us to do the whole time. That behavior doesn't change depending on, the different patriarch or something. So This is the point where I think it's fascinating that it's such an easy, light statement just sprinkled into Genesis that Rebecca would go to inquire of the Lord. Isn't that what we saw David do? Isn't that what we saw Moses and Aaron do? Isn't that what we saw all these other Joshua, all these other people in the scriptures where they would go to, they needed an answer for something. They went to the tabernacle where the angel of the presence was and inquired of the Lord.
Yep.
Now, that is one way they got answers. Another way is through the ephod, the breastplate. And I don't understand exactly how that works, but there was some process there as well, because there's a place in 1 Samuel where I think Saul asks if someone has the ephod so he can ask of the Lord, a question. But the point is, we already got Isaac and Abraham and the servant all interacting with this angel in the presence, in my opinion, from this story. So it would not be crazy to think that if Isaac's the priest, his wife would easily be able to go and say, hey, I got a question. Can we ask the Lord about this? Well, they go ask the representative that the Lord has sent them, who speaks on the Lord's behalf, this angel of the presence. So just like the conversation in Genesis 18 with the three angels that showed up and spoke with Abraham and Sarah, same concept. Yep. They got questions. They have a conversation. So yeah, just my thought. So sorry to belabor that a little bit, guys, but that's the way I feel about it. I don't know.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I love it.
Very interesting. Food for thought.
Yeah. Food for thought for sure. Who wants to take Ruth?
My turn to read, I think.
Yeah.
Wait, if it's a short one, give it to Josh.
I don't mind taking a longer one. Hang on. Let me find it here in the slides.
I'm just joshing you.
I never heard that one before.
Original.
All right. I got the slides right here.
Josh, you're from Florida, right?
Well, I grew up in Maryland, but I live in Tampa currently. Yes.
Oh, really? I was born in Silver Springs.
That's where I grew up.
There you go.
Right off Fairland Road.
Yeah, I didn't live there long, but I was born there. And then Matthew, you said you're in Atlanta area.
I am in North Georgia. I'm about halfway between Atlanta and Chattanooga, so that's an awesome spot. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Beautiful country.
Awesome.
Good deal. All right. Let me read my short passage here.
Check.
In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man from Bethlehem in Judah, with his wife and the 2 sons, went to reside in the land of Moab. This man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites, or Epaphrathites. Yeah, that's a tough one. From Bethlehem in Judah, and they entered the land of Moab and settled there. Then Naomi's husband, Elimelech, died, and she was left with her 2 sons, who took Moabite women as their wives, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. And after they had lived in Moab about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had attended to his people by providing them with food, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to leave the land of Moab. Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road leading back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to the 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you loving devotion as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord enable each of you to find rest in the home of your new husband." And she kissed them, and they wept aloud and said, "Surely we will return with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb to become your husband? Return home. My daughters, go. Go on, for I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me to have a husband tonight and to bear sons, would you wait for them to grow up? Would you refrain from having husbands? No, my daughters, it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." And again they wept aloud, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Follow her back home." But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn from following you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me ever so severely if anything but death separates you and me." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped trying to persuade her. So Naomi and Ruth traveled until they came to Bethlehem. When they entered Bethlehem, the whole city was stirred because of them. And the woman of the city exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Do not call me Naomi," she replied. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has dealt quite bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? After all, the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me." So Naomi returned from the land of Moab with her daughter-in-law Ruth the Moabitess, and they arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
All right. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. So we've got the introduction of Ruth. And in case people in the audience have not read this one before, this is a short little book. There's only 4 chapters we're going to cover. And we've got Ruth as being the daughter-in-law of Naomi. And I think it's interesting. I guess before we break this down, I'll just go ahead and read this actual summary for people reading, following at home. There was a time of famine when the judges ruled Israel. So Elimelech and his wife, Naomi, they moved to Moab. And I've always wondered why that is, but I think we're going to get the answer when we get to chapter 3 and 4. So Elimelech had 2 sons, Mahalan and Chilion. I can't say those names either. And Elimelech died and left Naomi as a widow. Mahalan and Chilion both married Moabite women. You see, that's the thing I don't get. Was it just a custom to have 2 boys and give them names that rhymed? Was that the idea? I don't understand. So Mahlon and Chilion also died. So now Naomi's in a rough spot, right? Because her husband and her 2 children, her 2 sons, die. Naomi and her daughter-in-law Ruth, the wife of the deceased Mahlon, relocates back to the land of Judah to Bethlehem. And Ruth assures her mother-in-law Naomi that she will make Yahweh her God also and stay with her until death. Guys, I don't know about y'all, but to me this looks like she's grafted in 100%. Naomi asked to be called Mara because of her sadness and loss. And I thought that was interesting that she kind of I don't want to like cast aspersions on Naomi's character, but it seems like she's taken these deaths difficult and she's kind of like blaming Yahweh to say, "Oh, Yahweh's dealt with me ever so severely," you know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, she definitely says that. I mean, don't call me that. Why would you think that you could call me that? You not see me right now?
So it's interesting that the 2 daughter-in-laws, she tells them, "You guys can go back to your Moabitess peoples." But Naomi's like, "No, I'm going to stay with you, and your God becomes my God." Mm-hmm. So to me, this is like that custom back then of what clan you're with, you automatically worship that God. So this is why it was such, to me, it seems like this is why Yahweh was always trying to tell the Israelites, you profane my name amongst the nations by worshiping these other gods. Like, I'm supposed to be connected to you. Like this, if you call yourself Israel, there is no other options here. It's me and you. You worship no other gods before me. You know what I'm saying? Whereas the people of the other nations, they worship this great pantheon of gods.
Yep.
And so I just think it's interesting that Naomi recognizes that. to the point where she's willing to verbally say, I'll stay with you till death, which I think is kind of sweet and righteous character as far as, the, what is it, 4th, 5th commandment? It's just honor your parents, honor your mother and father.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
This lady's lost her provider, her husband, and her backup providers, her 2 sons.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see here in the next chapter, Naomi tries to step in the role of a provider for Naomi's sake, or excuse me, I should say Ruth.
Yeah.
Ruth does by going to work. And so to me, I don't know. What do you guys think? I see her trying to honor her mother.
Well, it also, yes, I do agree with that. But kind of like the moment that Abraham had where he's like, why do we worship these things? They can't do anything. I'm sure that, if Naomi had, if Naomi had an experience and her husband and her sons, like they would have talked about the God of Israel. And so if Ruth had been paying attention, she'd have been like, if that really is your God and that's who you're going back to, I kind of want to be a part of that. I don't want to stay here and bat on these wood and metal things, like, I guess, but that sounds a lot more interesting. Yeah, right. I mean, it's like if she would have heard the stories and would have known, like it seems like she had that same kind of inquisitive nature of Abraham. Like, what are we doing? Like, why? This doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I go back home? Sure, I want to go with you. This sounds better. Yeah.
And I don't know where Ruth came from. Who knows? She may have came from a bad family herself. But she clearly had a choice to make. The other girl made the other choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The other girl went back to her Moabite clans and that system and family. And Naomi's like, yeah, not only am I going to stay with you. Ruth said, not only am I going to stay with you, but I'm going to leave this area that I've known and go to a place I've never known and live with you there. And I think that's something to consider as righteous and noble character that she's trying to make sure Naomi's taken care of. And I think it's Matthew, it's your turn.
What, to read?
Is it your turn to read? I'm sorry. Did you guys have anything else to talk about?
Yeah, I actually want to bring up the fact that I'm kind of a word nerd like you, Sean. So whenever I'm reading context in a story, it's so interesting that the names of people are tied into what's going on. So this one right here, where she says, call me Mara, which means bitterness. So she's struggling in her being. And then another one is, I'm trying to think of off the top of my head, like Ichabod, where I think it means no esteem. Esteem is departed. So that one, there's a lot of different examples. Well, this is just one of many where a person's name in the story ties into what is going on in the context of the story. That's always fascinating to me.
That is, yeah. It'd be pretty interesting if we still had that custom today, because there would have been a time in my life where I would have had people call me Mara.
I would have had a lot of names as a teenager in my 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in high school, I didn't know any better, right? When I was in high school, but this is before I became a believer. And then I started to learn a little bit, but people used to call me a nickname. They called me Zeus. And I didn't know, and so I just thought it was funny. And I later on, that name followed me even through college and different places, because people that would know me, that nickname kind of followed me a little bit. But I didn't tell people, I didn't introduce myself as that, right? Because once I became a believer, I didn't really like people calling me that. Mm-hmm. But I just remember they called me that because of certain things I did, just acting stupid as a kid in high school that, I guess other guys didn't think they could do or whatever. So they called me that. And then I remember when I was in my mid-20s, I ran into a dude. He also had like a Greek name, but it was his real name. It was Thaddeus. My. And so he was like, and then someone came up to me when Thaddeus was there and they called me Zeus. And because they had known me from way back, and he was like, your name's Zeus? And so he was all, he thought it was real. Yeah, he was all kind of excited about it. I was like, no, that's just an old nickname. So yeah, it's interesting how, I guess we would just call these nicknames maybe, or did she? Because I think she doesn't stay with the name Mara. I think we're going to read that she has people call her Naomi later. Yeah, but it's interesting at this time in her life, she's like, I'm going to change my whole identity, even my name. So what would this be like politically today? Would Naomi be her dead name now? She'd be like, quit dead naming me. I guess.
Oh man.
Oh, anyway. So let's anything else in this chapter you guys need to discuss?
No, not me.
Okay. All right, let's jump into chapter 2. And Matthew, if you'll take this one.
Yes, sir. Gotcha. Now, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a prominent man of noble character from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go into the fields and glean heads of grain after someone in whose sight I may find favor." "Go ahead, my daughter," Naomi replied. So Ruth departed and went out into the field and gleaned after the harvesters. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and said to the harvesters, "Yahweh be with you. Yahweh bless you." They replied. And Boaz asked the foreman of his harvesters, "Whose young woman is this?" The foreman answered, "She is the Moabitess who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. She has said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the harvesters.' So she came out and has continued from morning until now, except that she rested a short time in the shelter." Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, do not go glean in another field, and do not go away from this place, but stay here close to my servant girls. Let your eyes be on the field they are harvesting, and follow along after these girls. Indeed, I have ordered the young men not to touch you, and when you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars the young men have filled." At this, she fell on her face, bowing low to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, even though I am a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I have been made fully aware of all you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in the land of your birth, and how you came to a people you did not know before. May Yahweh repay your work, and may you receive a rich reward from Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, under whose wings you have taken refuge." "My master," she said, "may I continue to find favor in your eyes? For you have comforted and spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your servant girls." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, have some bread and dip it into the vinegar sauce." So she sat down beside the harvesters, and he offered her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied and had some left over. When Ruth got up to glean, Boaz ordered his young men, "Even if she gathers among the sheaves, do not insult her. Rather pull out for her some stalks from the bundles and leave them for her to gather. Do not rebuke her." So Ruth gathered grain in the field until evening, and when she beat out what she had gleaned, it was about an ephah of barley. She picked up the grain and went into the town, where her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought out what she had saved from her meal and gave it to Naomi. Then her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today, and where did you work?" "Blessed be the man who noticed you." So she told her mother-in-law where she had worked. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz," she said. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by Yahweh, who has not withdrawn his kindness from the living or the dead." Naomi continued, "The man is a close relative. He is one of our kinsman redeemers." Then Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also told me, 'Stay with my young men until they have finished gathering all my harvest.'" And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, "My daughter, it is good for you to work with his young women, so that nothing will happen to you in another field." So Ruth stayed close to the servant girls of Boaz to glean grain until the barley and wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law.
Okay. Thank you very much. So just like we were talking about in last chapter, it seems that Boaz did recognize Ruth's righteous character. She's like, "Well, I heard about all that you've been doing for Naomi." So I think that's, it seems like a stretch of an assumption, but I based my assumption off of Boaz's evaluation of Ruth, which was if the word got around to the point where he actually says, "Yeah, I've heard what you've done for Naomi and how you left your parents and came with her and everything like that," in their culture in that time, that seemed like an incredibly righteous act of kindness. What do you guys think?
Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Well, one of the thoughts that I had that just popped into my head as Matthew was reading is that based on what would have happened, Ruth was taking care of Naomi because she had no sons. But if Ruth spends her whole youth and her young times taking care of Naomi, and she's not married, and she gets to the point where she's old and has no husband, like that's it. And so that's kind of like the definition of giving to someone who you know can't repay you. And in Proverbs today, it talks about how when you do that, you're loaning to the Lord, who will repay. And so I just was thinking about, that's interesting how Boaz kind of recognizes, wow, like you've been a big time servant to her, because you're literally giving up something that you're never going to get back. And it was interesting how it kind of cross-referenced with that proverb the other day. Like, yeah, well, but that she finds favor with the Lord because that's his character doesn't change. Like he takes care of those who have that kind of heart. So I thought
and I guess this also falls into the Torah for taking care of the widows as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So yeah, this is a cool thing. And then of course we see now Ruth is not afraid to work. So in case people are asking, that this misconception that a lot of people will have who haven't read the actual Bible, and they'll say, that Old Testament stuff where, the women were just expected to be at home barefoot and pregnant all the time. And I'm like, actually, if you read Proverbs 31, because that's what I'm seeing come out of this Ruth character, is that she's willing to go in the fields and work. And I think it's interesting that Boaz tells her, stick close to my dudes and my girl servants that are working in my fields. And
I got you.
I will take care of you, watch over you. He's willing to kind of let her eat with them at lunchtime on break and give her some extra food. And then he also tells his servant men not to rebuke her, not to treat her harshly. And in fact, even glean some extra grain for her to pick up if you need to, like even go out of your way to give her an opportunity to feel useful and productive, even if she doesn't know what she's doing right now. At least that's the way it came off to me. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah. It definitely felt like a big brother kind of to a little sister, like, hey, she's kind of new at this. Just don't give her a hard time. Let her go.
Yeah. But the men say that she was willing to work. She said, except for that little time she took a break in the shed. She was out
kind of
working.
Surprised. He's like, yeah, she's been working all day. Like she took one little break, but she's been going. Yeah, that's kind of the impression I got.
Yeah, she's willing to put in some hard work and get out there and work with her hands, work in the fields. It's funny because it reminds me of my grandmother, who talked about how she met my grandfather in the cotton fields. And this was back in the early 20th century in Oklahoma. And that they had actually were working in a field for a farmer picking cotton. And they were being paid. Wow. They were, but they that's where they met. And my grandmother said that my grandfather came over to her where she was in the row that she was working. And like his pickup line was, if you want, I'll hoe your row for you.
Oh my gosh.
That was like how he introduced himself and tried to get her attention and started flirting with her. He was like, I'll do your work for you if you want. And so, it's interesting that she's meeting, and here's Ruth meeting some potential suitor in the fields as well. So
it's kind of like Jacob trying to do the work of the servant girls too, or was it Jacob? No, was it Jacob or Moses? I can't remember. One of them was like trying to show off, like, oh, let me get it for you at the well. I'm thinking, sorry,
it's okay.
Something mixed up. Your story.
Well, this here on screen, I got the summary for those following along at home. If you guys are using this for your study guides, that Ruth chapter 2, we got Boaz as a relative of Elimelech. Notice that Ruth was working in his field and showed her kindness. Boaz instructed his men to watch over Ruth's work and help her produce and keep her from insult or rebuke. And Naomi explains to Ruth that Boaz is their family kinsman redeemer. And Naomi encourages Ruth to follow Boaz's instructions and work the same field as his men servants and other servant girls. You guys have any idea about this term, kinsman redeemer? Do you guys, what are your thoughts on that?
It's been a minute since I looked at it.
Isn't the kinsman redeemer if let's say that a brother has a wife, husband dies, the brother of the husband is to then go sleep with the wife to hopefully give her offspring in his brother's name, so that way the name of that individual can continue on, right? Yeah,
that's my understanding. I think it actually ties in with that and another facet of it, which honestly, I didn't realize how extensive this term was until I did this study this week.
Okay.
Because I always thought initially it was just that too. And we're going to see in chapter 4 how it actually encompasses more than just the opportunity for this widow to get married to one of the family members and keep that family line going. So, but yeah, that's that was traditionally my understanding, is that all it applied to, but apparently it applies to a little bit more. We'll read that in chapter 4 as well. But what about you, Matthew?
I was thinking that this is actually a Torah, because isn't there an example of this in the Torah? Another place, or actually in the Torah, because we're reading Ruth. Sorry. I'm trying to think of the example. I cannot remember.
Tamar, or not Tamar. The brother. It's in Genesis.
Genesis 38. And Onan.
That's right. Yeah.
There you go.
But unfortunately, neither of them actually fulfilled the duty, and suffered some consequence for abusing that privilege. Yeah.
So we're supposed to from the example. They just didn't do it.
Yeah.
Judah's sons for Tamar, right? Which is why then he didn't want his third son to die.
Wait a minute, guys. Are you guys trying to say that the law broken down in Deuteronomy for the kinsman redeemer was also being followed in Genesis 38?
Oh.
Wait a minute. I thought the law only came at Mount Sinai.
Definitely not. Way before it.
Apparently not.
Yeah. So it's gonna expound a little bit further into this kinsman redeemer idea, but clearly Boaz is showing some kindness to her. Naomi recognizes the kindness being extended to her, and she even makes this comment that she's not like the other servant girls, because she's from Moab. She's a Moabite. She's a foreigner, right? So here's Boaz also doing Torah by treating with one standard of behavior, one law. He's treating a foreigner who's in her land, in his land, literally in his field. Yeah. But he's treating her with the same love, kindness, and respect, which is what Torah would instruct. So
equal weights and measures.
That's right. Yeah. And he knows the story of who she is and where she's from, and he's still treating her with the same regard, which I think is great. If there's nothing else in this, we'll go to chapter 3. Let's go. All right. Oh wait, I had another segment we'll jump into real quick. Hang on, guys. I forgot about this one. So this is Come Let Us Reason Together. We have a quick question about Ruth. And I apologize, guys. I think we got ahead of ourselves. We touched on this a little bit already, but what?
I saw that. I wasn't going to say nothing.
Yeah,
I probably screwed this up.
But when we saw chapter 2 and Boaz takes notice of Ruth, what behavior do we think impressed Boaz?
Well, we've already said she's a hard worker, so
she's a hard worker.
She takes care of the widows. She did those two.
Yeah.
I think the sacrifice of following Naomi and staying with her versus going back to her own people, collecting her own husband, and kind of doing her own thing is the primary. Because he says, "I heard all that you've done for Naomi."
Yeah. Yeah, and essentially everything we've been describing, all these traits that Ruth is presenting that Boaz takes notice of, is Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And like we saw in chapter 1, Ruth tells Naomi, "Your God will become my God. I'm going to go with you to your land, and I'll be, I'm going to leave my family, my land, go with you." And though it doesn't say the actual words, what we're reading, the process being described, is grafting in, and Ruth. Yep. Even a Moabitess woman is willing to be grafted in to the covenant of Israel with Yahweh and do his behavior, do his Torah. And as a result of it, another guy who's Torah observant takes notice. Mm-hmm. So to the ladies out there, if you want a good man who owns some land, do Torah. That's what I would suggest. Yeah. So, but yeah, I appreciate you guys entertaining me on this segment. But we'll jump into chapter 3 real quick. I think it's my turn to read.
Mm-hmm.
All right. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek a resting place for you, that it may be well with you? Now, is not Boaz, with whose servant girl you have been working, a relative of ours? In fact, tonight he is winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself, put on perfume, and wear your best clothes. Go down to the threshing floor, but do not let the man know you are there until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies, and then go in and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will explain to you what you should do." "I will do everything you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law had instructed her to do. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then Ruth went in secretly, uncovered his feet, and laid down. At midnight, Boaz was startled and turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your servant Ruth," she replied. Excuse me, guys. Then Boaz said, "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. You have shown more kindness now than before, because you have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now do not be afraid, my daughter. I will do for you whatever you request, since all my fellow townspeople know that you are a woman of noble character. Yet it's true that I am a kinsman redeemer, but there is another redeemer nearer than I. Stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not want to redeem you, as surely as the Lord lives, I will. Now lie here until morning." So she lay down at his feet until morning, but she got up before anyone else could recognize her. Then Boaz said, "Do not let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." And he told her, "Bring the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." And when she did so, he shoveled 6 measures of barley into her shawl. Then he went into the city. When Ruth returned to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked her, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then Ruth told her all that Boaz had done for her. And she said, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.' Wait, my daughter," said Naomi, until you find out how things go, for he will not rest unless he has resolved the matter today." All right. Interesting. So what do you guys think?
Well, I think
After reading that.
a couple of things that were interesting. I find it funny that as soon as Ruth mentioned, "Well, you're a kinsman redeemer," Boaz was like, "Yeah, I know." Almost like he was like, "Oh, who is that? Oh, I'm a kinsman redeemer. How about that?" He kind of just playing it cool, being the guy that's too afraid to walk up and say something first.
Yeah.
Or maybe he knew that he couldn't because he wasn't the closest kinsman redeemer.
Yeah, that's interesting that that's pointed out here, right? Is he actually comes forward and he's like, "Yeah, I appreciate it, but there's another dude that's apparently closer related to you than I am, so he should fill this spot. So we'll talk to him and see if he wants it." What a weird cultural concept. We have no grasp of, right? To be like,
Mhm.
"Let me go see if Jedediah wants you, and if not, I'll take you."
I'm gonna go sleep at
it's
your
just
feet.
yeah. I mean, it's funny because one of my wife's dogs, he likes to jump on the bed and sleep at my feet. And so it's actually more warming, even though I give her a hard time about the dog. It's more warming than an actual blanket.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, our
You know what
dog
I mean?
sleeps in our bed too, and she's like a volcano. She's hot.
So I can understand that he would wake up and be like, "Oh, my feet aren't freezing cold. Like, what's going on?" And then there's this beautiful woman at his feet, and she's like keeping him like, to me, that's an amazing gesture. And how interesting that Yeshua also is making a big deal about washing his disciples' feet.
Yep.
There's something about the foot and being of service to the foot that like is just, not only is it in this regard kind of romantic, but then in other regards, it's an act of servitude and humility.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of feet, and we done Passover celebrations in the past where men washing other people's feet. I didn't enjoy it, but I did it to follow his example. But I'm not a fan of feet.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I can see just taking like a prosthetic leg and slipping it through your jeans and just let them wash that. Yeah.
That's funny.
That's very funny.
So we got here in chapter 3, Naomi instructs Ruth to pursue Boaz by lying at his uncovered feet while he's sleeping at the threshing floor. When Boaz wakes and sees her at his feet, he praises her for her noble character. And Boaz tells her he will check with another man who might have her as his wife, and if not, he will have her. Ruth sleeps at his feet until morning and sneaks away. Boaz tells her to keep her visit to the threshing floor a secret. Boaz sends a gift with Ruth for Naomi. That's awesome. That was another act of him showing kindness to a widow.
Yep.
And then Naomi encourages Ruth to patiently wait for Boaz to resolve the matter. Why do you guys think that Boaz was like, "Hey, don't tell anybody that you are here"?
I think it seems kind of scandalous at first, like being unmarried in the same
Yep.
bed together, laying down there. Like, also too, this one thing that I was interested in at first is it says after he had ate and drank and was feeling good, he lay down to sleep. Right?
Yeah.
So he was feeling good for a little bit. So yeah, I mean, maybe it was a little bit scandalous. That's the only thing I can think of.
I think you're right. Yeah, because
Yeah, I
like
agree.
what kind of precedent if he's like the boss, so to speak, right? And he's working. He's a good worker, by the way, because he's apparently doing this all night to the point where he falls asleep at the place of the work.
Yep.
That he doesn't want to set a precedent for the men to maybe take the other maidservant girls to the threshing floor overnight. You know what I mean? So
his whole workforce would be.
yeah, right. It's like don't let anyone know that there was a woman here. They're not supposed to be here overnight. So I think to me this also goes back to something that we read in chapter 2 we didn't really talk about, which was the Torah of Deuteronomy chapter 22 pertaining to when a young virgin is found in the field, that if she, she can encounter a dangerous situation and get raped because there's no one there for her to cry out to, and how that person is held harmless. And so Boaz is trying to protect Naomi from the get-go in this regard by telling her, hey, don't just stay close to my men in the field and stay and work with the servant girls, because he's trying to protect her from being found either in another field accidentally, because clearly she didn't know what she was doing. That's why he had to kind of give special provisions for her not be rebuked and to help her with her work. And then maybe she gets too far in the field and some stranger finds her. I don't know how big these fields are, but the point is that was the thing in Torah, which is if a woman is found in a field and a man takes her and lies with her by force and he rapes her and she has no one to cry out to, that she's not guilty. But even still, like Boaz is like trying to protect her. Like he doesn't want her to have to even be anywhere close to that scenario. Yeah.
This shows Boaz's character with the whole Ruth laying at his feet.
Yeah.
Because it could have went differently.
But yeah, especially after you had some drinks, you're feeling good and you go to sleep.
Yeah.
Wake up,
there's a beautiful go down too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, and maybe that's part of the reason why he didn't want her to say anything too, is because if word got out that she was just sleeping, not sleeping, but like sleeping at his feet, when Boaz went to try to actually ask the other guy, hey, listen, you're the first in line kinsman redeemer. Do you want to do this? It doesn't muddy the waters. Like, oh, well, you've already kind of been with her. So I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like he wanted to kind of actually give the guy a fair chance. Cause I think he wanted to do what was right.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. I guess that's true. That perception of the other dude, if he had found out, he may have swayed his decision and taken her and redeeming her. So yeah, it's interesting. All right. Who wants anything else to say in this chapter, or do we want to go to chapter 4?
I guess I'll take it.
Okay.
You stealing from me? Daggone.
Oh, is it your turn?
Oh, is it? Yes. Okay, yeah, Josh, it's your turn, isn't it? Yeah, go ahead.
I really don't care. I was just busting your chops.
No, it's okay. That way that Matthew can get John chapter 5.
Perfect. All right. It says, meanwhile, Boaz went to the gate and sat down there. Soon the kinsman redeemer of whom he had spoken came along, and Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down, and Boaz took 10 elders of the city, and he said, sit here. And they did so. And he said to the kinsman redeemer, Naomi, who has returned from the land of Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should inform you that you may buy it back in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you want to redeem it, do so. But if you will not redeem it, tell me so that I may know, because there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. I will redeem it, he replied. Then Boaz said, on the day that you buy the land from Naomi, and also from Ruth the Moabitess, you must also acquire the widow of the deceased in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance. The kinsman redeemer replied, I cannot redeem it myself, or I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption, because I cannot redeem it. Now, in former times in Israel, concerning the redemption or exchange of property, to make any matter legally binding, a man would remove his sandal and give it to the other party. And this was a confirmation in Israel. So the kinsman redeemer removed his sandal and said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. At this, Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today that I am buying from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife to raise up the name of the descendants through his inheritance, so that his name will not disappear from among his peoples or from the gate of his home. You are witnesses today. We are witnesses, said the elders, and all the people at the gate. May the Lord make the woman entering your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you be prosperous in Ephrathah, and famous in Bethlehem. And may your house become like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring the Lord will give you by this young man. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he had relations with her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a kinsman redeemer. May his name become famous in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." And Naomi took the child, placed him on her lap, and became a nurse to him. The neighbor woman said, a son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Aminadab. Aminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz. Boaz the father of Obed. And Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David.
All right. So thank you for that, Josh. Chapter 4, all of this comes to a close. We see Boaz goes before the elders at the city, at the gates. It seems like he was an elder too. Did you guys get that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
feeling? So. Yeah. So this is what kind of reminded me of what Abraham does with the Hittite elders. Make sure that this transaction is witnessed by everybody.
Yep.
Even to the point where these other elders verbally say, "We are witnesses," So
they didn't write contracts that much. It was all just word of mouth, it seems like.
Kind of like a handshake.
Yeah, someone in the live chat's asking real quick. They're asking about the small linked verses at the bottom of each section. Guys, that's for your own personal study. So what I've done is I've actually, with the little footnote indicators throughout the sentences and the correlating passages linked below, those are for your extra study. If you want to go and look at those later and look those passages up that correlate or relate to that concept. And it may be stuff that we don't even talk about here in the breakdown. So this is just why I release all these slides free on our Patreon so that you can go and study these on your own if you like in your own fellowship. So just some added bonuses for you. Mm-hmm. But basically, I love the fact that here we have Boaz is going through the proper process like he should. The other guy can't do this, right? He says, if I redeem her, it's going to affect my own inheritance. So back in Deuteronomy, where this is broken down, if the kinsman doesn't redeem the woman, she has the right to spit in his face. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
The Hebrews and their interesting customs.
Right. So if he gives the sandal, the house of one sandaled shoe is what his household becomes. That's the name given to his household after that. But she also has the right to spit in his face. But we don't see that happen here. And it could be because immediately the responsibility was deferred to Boaz, and he's willing to take it. He already assured Ruth that he would take her. So she doesn't have to go through that shame and rejection publicly and save face by spitting in his face. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just guessing. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, because I mean, if this is just a council of the elders, the rest of the town wouldn't have known, and all they would have seen is that, oh, look at that, a kinsman redeemer was able to do his duty, and it happens to be Boaz. They probably didn't get all the inside details of what would be like a meeting of the elders at the city gate, if you will.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. That kind of helps me at least make more sense of why he tells her in chapter 3, hey, if this other guy who's actually nearer to you than I am, if he redeems you, or if he doesn't redeem you, I'll take you, because he knows the process, and he's been protecting Ruth this whole time. So like, he doesn't want her to go through that public shame of a kinsman rejecting her and not taking her, especially because she's not a daughter of Israel. She's a foreigner, right? That's grafted in.
She's not native born.
And I hope that people can understand, as we've tried to talk about this multiple times, that she is a daughter of Israel according to covenant because she's grafted in, but she's not technically native born. You know what I mean? She married into a guy from Judah, the tribe of Judah, Mahlon or whatever. But so yeah, that could be another thing going through Boaz's mind, is like, well, this other guy may not take her because he knows who she is and where she's from. But it seems so. Go ahead, Matthew.
Oh, you go and finish.
I was just going to say, it seems like he the other guy that didn't take her, he's saying he had like legal conflicts. And I don't know how that works out personally. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but he's like, I can't, if I do, it's going to mess up my inheritance. So I don't exactly know how that works.
Was it just from a provisioning standpoint? I mean, if he wasn't that wealthy and you have to divide up your inheritance, there comes a point where you can divide it so small that it's kind of worthless. It's like, oh gosh, one more person to add in there. I've got a widow and the other woman. I can't take two people on, because Naomi comes along with the package as well. We see that. And so maybe it's just like, it's just a financial thing. Like, I literally can't afford to actually do that.
It's possible, but I think he's got a, and I love that you're going this route, because this is what I was hinting at back in chapter 1 and 2, which was the right of the kinsman redeemer apparently applies to more than just taking the widow as your wife. Because what's mentioned in chapter 4 is what we see is Boaz says that this field that Naomi and Ruth own, who's going to buy this field and redeem it? So the redeeming is more than just taking care of the widow. It also seems to be the Torah involving Leviticus 25 and the redemption of the land. So the land itself is, you have this opportunity that the land can't be sold permanently, but thus every piece of property you possess must provide for the redemption of the land.
Interesting.
And if your brother becomes impoverished and sells some of his property, and his nearest of kin may come and redeem what his brother sold. So this is kind of, to me, it kind of answers the question of why did Naomi and her husband Elimelech move to Moab to begin with? It says in the very, very beginning of Ruth chapter 1 that there was famine in the land. So they must have become impoverished and then had to sell their property for money. And then without having now land or resource, they had to move to a different territory.
And so in order to actually fulfill the role of kinsman redeemer, first step was buy the land. And it's like, well, crap, if I go and buy all that land, that's going to take a lot of my resources. I physically can't do that. Doesn't he say it puts my family, my inheritance in jeopardy?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That would make sense.
So it's interesting to me that this seemed like a plausible reason. Like, we're getting into the nitty gritty of the Torah, guys. This is why I love this. I love the book of Ruth. Like they're going into like the full on details of, all right, now we got this land we got to deal with, and we got it tied to a widow, 2 widows actually, with this land, and we got to take care of this matter so that the land is in the proper hands of the right people and of the right family, and also that these women are taken care of. So it's like, I don't know, can you guys think of a real world example or case where this type of attention to detail and thought and care has been done in the modern times, when a wealthy man or a man passes? Okay, so I guess we can't even apply this to modern times, because Leviticus 25:25 is not observed or practiced in modern times. Like, if you sell your piece of property, it's gone from your family forever.
Yep.
There's no opportunity to redeem it.
Nope, never.
You know what I mean?
Unless you buy it back.
Yeah, unless you just physically buy it back, and usually at a higher price. So I guess you can't even truly applicably translate this to modern society in the United States.
Nope.
It's God's answer to the political issues of redistribution of wealth and the gap and all that.
Exactly.
Solves a lot of this.
Monsanto couldn't come in and buy up your land and take it out of your family forever if there was always a right to redeem it.
Yeah.
So how interesting, guys, that the Torah ensures that foreigners can't come in and buy up your land and push you out.
Another example of Father's mercy in the Torah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing to me. I'm sorry, guys. I was just realizing that.
No.
So yeah, I think this is cool because Leviticus 25 is actually in play here. How many other times in Scripture have you ever seen a boring chapter like land redemption, Leviticus 25, become a significant plot device in a story that leads to the genealogy of Messiah?
Well,
not a lot.
That's actually what I was just thinking of. Like the whole. So I know that I've read Ruth before, but I've not in recent times. And what I love is at the beginning of the story, which is so often how our life is.
Yeah.
You know, Naomi comes back and she's like, "Don't call me Naomi, call me bitter. My life is horrible." Maybe her husband's and had that offspring. You know, her husband survived, and her daughters or her actual son survived. That line wouldn't have been the one that Yeshua could have come through. And here, because of this seeming tragedy, what ends up with Boaz, this amazing guy taking care of both of them, then leads to you being a part of the bloodline of the Messiah. Like, we are so incapable of seeing what God is doing sometimes in our distress. It's like, this isn't this one book we see from Naomi, like, I don't call me Naomi, I'm bitter, to you get to be a part of the bloodline of our Messiah now with the way this turned out. Like, we can't see the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful. And even the minute details of the Father's Torah pertaining to land redemption becomes a relevant factor in how this wonderful woman gets grafted in and becomes the great grandmother of Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just mind-blowing to me. It's just mind-blowing to me. And it also kind of points to the fact that Israel is a covenant thing, not a racial thing.
Right. Because Naomi's a Moabitess.
Yeah.
Or not
Yeah.
Naomi, Ruth is a Moabitess. I mean,
Yeah, because we're technically all descendants of Noah anyway, right? So the very fact that
Yep.
you have the different quote unquote nations, and then you have this idea of their cultural identity and inheritance, and being like, all right, well, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is because Judaism promotes prejudice. And guys, I know people hear me use the word Judaism a lot, and they're thinking that I'm just picking on them. It's a different religion. That's why I'm not just picking on them for the sake of just, it's not like I'm just saying, oh, those Mormons are crazy with their underwear on all the time. I'm not just picking on them. I'm saying it's a different religion that rejects the Father and the Son.
yeah.
Unfortunately, so many people that study the Torah and use that word Torah, which literally just means discipleship. And unfortunately, so many people that adopt that terminology look to Judaism for answers. Stop it. They reject the Father and the Son.
Yeah.
Look to the scriptures for the answers. It's all in there.
Oh, man.
Stop asking a rabbi's opinion on something. He doesn't believe in your Messiah who followed Torah. The rabbi teaches traditions of men, just like the ones in the first century AD that don't follow Torah. So Judaism has tried to tell people that Israel, if you're blood born of Israel, you're in a special race that's chosen by God. That's the Father has tried to tell us all throughout his word that if you want to become in covenant with Israel and be a part of the Commonwealth of Israel, as Paul calls it, then you get grafted in through obedience. And even if you're born into that family line that literally is a descendant of Abraham, and you're not obedient to his law, his Torah, then you're counted as if you're not circumcised, as if you're not an Israelite. Because go ahead.
Sorry, it goes right to the point. And forgive me if I'm jumping ahead. I can't remember if it's in this or not. But when Jesus says, "Who is my mother and my brother? Those who obey the commands." It's the exact same thing.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm jumping there real quick. So I think I guess I'll say something about it. The Talmud. I'm sure you studied a little bit about it, Sean. It has some horrendous stuff in there, especially about the Messiah. And people go to that instead of Torah. It's like, So Ruth. Go ahead.
I thought you were done. No, I was going to comment.
Well, I got another point that's different. If you want to go ahead and jump in on that.
No, to your point about people going to the Talmud or whatever, especially in my journey to understand Torah, as I started to just sit down and read my Bible, I was like, man, that doesn't line up with what I've been taught. That doesn't line up with what I've been taught. And as I've gone to talk to my friends about it, like, hey, why do we believe this? Why do you believe that? I've encountered so many people that don't think that they are capable of understanding the scriptures. And I think the biggest deception is that we need somebody who's learned to be able to tell you what it means. It's like, but I know how definition of words work. I just read it. This is what it says. Am I wrong? Am I missing something? But so many people just don't feel confident. Like, I need somebody who's learned or who's skilled or who's studied to teach me. It's like, no, you can figure this out. Just read. It's right there.
Everybody has the Spirit, so he can help everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen. For sure.
I was going to say make another point that Ruth is a great example of Isaiah 56 and Romans 11. So I think I made this statement to my wife the other day. A lot of people want to make it about race or color, but when you stand on Judgment Day in front of the Most High and His Son, He's not going to be looking at what you look like. He's going to be looking at your heart and what you did. If you chose to walk in His Torah or not, that's where you're going to be judged on. And having faith in Messiah too, but mostly the blueprint, aka the Torah. That's where we're going to be judged on.
Amen. That is every word indeed. That word indeed has to be lined up to some kind of standard. Well, that standard's been detailed for us through the prophets, given to us by the Almighty, and we can read it, study it, learn it, and know how to pass the test when we get to that point. This is why Yeshua in Luke 20 talks about those who are considered worthy to attain that kingdom to come. Right. So you are evaluated on your behavior. Even just saying that you believe in Jesus is one thing. and that's a great start. Please do that, right? Please come to that realization. But at the same time, it requires action. It requires discipleship, to be sanctified, to walk in sanctification of learning his behavior, applying it to your life, to where you start adopting your behavior to look like actual Jesus, right? Because if you say you believe in Jesus, but then go act like Jeffrey Dahmer, I don't think it's going to go well for you on Judgment Day.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
One of these things is not like the other.
Right. You got to act like him too. You can't just believe in him. So yeah, for sure. Okay. So we got some things happening here in chapter 4. Now, in addition to this amazing moment where Ruth is not only, the land of her family's redeemed. So now that means they have property again, but also Boaz takes her as his wife. So she conceives as a child, and Naomi is comforted being, a new grandmother. Because this means apparently from the 2 sons previously, no one had any children yet before they died.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a great moment for Naomi being elderly in life, and she's got someone taking care of her. Now she's connected to the wealth of Boaz. She's got her own land back, and she's comforted by being a grandmother and being able to, help with the boy. To me, it's just a beautiful story because I don't know who Naomi. Did it say what tribe Naomi was from?
I don't think
I
it
don't
did.
remember.
No, it just tells us Elimelech was from the tribe of Judah, right? Near Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know where she's from, but basically she's getting all this benefit because she married Elimelech. And what she thought was going to be a nice life, right? I got a husband, got 2 boys. We're going to build our family. We got our own land. Bad times come. There's famine, and they have to sell their land. They got to move to a foreign place. Her husband and her sons die. We don't get the story of like how they died, what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently they died in such short manner that she didn't have any grandchildren yet. And then this is the story of how the Lord takes care of her and blesses her throughout what he's already put down for them to follow. The behavior they're supposed to follow takes care of Naomi in spite of these bad circumstances. Guys, think about this for a minute. Verse 1 of Ruth chapter 1 says that there was famine in the land during the days of the judges. Well, what do we read in the book of Judges? They're not serving Yahweh consistently. Yeah. They continue to do whatever's right in their own eyes. Like every 20 years, they flip-flop. It's like it's this crazy, Jekyll and Hyde mentality of like, oh, these 20 years there was this one judge that ruled over him, and he was right in the eyes of the Lord. The next 20 years there's another judge, and then the people did what they want in what was right in their own eyes, and they stopped following Torah, and they would go back to following Torah, and then start again. So yeah, that means the covenant of the Torah that Yahweh explains in Leviticus 26 is you stop doing my behavior, you're going to have famine in the land. And that's what. So even though they're experiencing the consequence of transgressing the Torah, the Father's Torah is so masterfully good that it has provisions to take care of the people during that time. So famine, people around her caused the famine because not enough people are doing the Torah to be righteous in the land. So Naomi is a result of that famine. And then tragedy strikes in her personal life with her husband and sons. That all these things are out of her control. But the Father's Torah is so amazing. She's taken care of all along the way because people are following his law. And I don't know, guys. I just think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. That not just because, I know a lot of women love this story because of the fact that Naomi's taken care of and Ruth finds a husband, but I love it for, I'm not a girl, so therefore I love it for different reasons. I love it for the fact that it shows the father's behavior is so wonderful and he cares for his daughters so much that he built all this stuff into his law to make sure that his daughters are cared for.
Yeah.
That's beautiful to me.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure Boaz was the alpha.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he was.
And he got blessed a lot, so he was doing something right.
Yeah, he exemplified Torah behavior consistently in the story, so I'm sure he did that before the story started too. All right, guys, anything else in this chapter you want to talk about?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think this actually, I just want to hear from the audience at this point, because we were talking about, the Leviticus 25 relating to, what seems to be kind of a boring regulation as far as the father explaining about redemption of the land and how that works and everything. A lot of people just skip right over that channel or that verse in Leviticus 25. But
I used to.
Yeah, right. But look how amazing of a piece of the plot it played in this story that ends up pertaining to the genealogy of the Messiah. So if you guys weren't aware of that, tell us in the comments, tell us in the live chat. We'd love to hear from you at this point. All right, brothers. Matthew, do you want to pick up John chapter 5?
Yes, sir. I got you.
All right.
All right, let me get down to it. Oh, there we go. Sometime later, there was a feast of the Jews, and Yeshua went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gates, a pool with 5 covered colonnades, which in Hebrew is called Bethesda. On these walkways lay a great number of the sick, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed, awaiting the moving of the waters. For from time to time an angel descended into the pool and stirred the water. As soon as it was stirred, the first to enter the pool would be healed of his disease. One man there has been an invalid for 38 years. When Yeshua saw him lying there and realized that he had spent a long time in this condition, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am on my way, someone else goes in before me." Then Yeshua told him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." Immediately the man was made well, and he picked up his mat and began to walk. Now this happened on the Sabbath day. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "This is the Sabbath. It is unlawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered, "The man who made me well told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" "Who is this man who told you to pick it up and walk?" they asked. But the man who was healed did not know who it was, for Yeshua had slipped away while the crowd was there. Afterward, Yeshua found the man at the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." And the man went away and told the Jews that it was Yeshua who made him well. Now, because Yeshua was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jews began to persecute him. But Yeshua answered them, "To this very day, my Father is at work, and I too am working." Because of this, the Jews tried all the harder to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling Elohim his own Father, making himself equal with Elohim. So Yeshua replied, "Truly, truly, I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself unless he sees the Father doing it. For whatever the Father does, the Son also does. The Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. And to your amazement, he will show him even greater works than these. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to him whom he wishes. Furthermore, the Father judges no one, but has assigned all judgment to the Son, so that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Truly, truly, I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not come under judgment. Indeed, he has crossed over from death to life. Truly, truly, I tell you, the hour is coming, and has now come, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of Elohim, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so also he has granted the Son to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to execute judgment, because he is the Son of Man. Do not be amazed at this, for the hour is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of death. I can do nothing by myself. I judge only as I hear. And my judgment is just, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of him who sent me. If I testify about myself, my testimony is not valid. There is another who testifies about me, and I know that his testimony about me is valid. You have sent to John, and he has testified to the truth. Even though I do not accept human testimony, I say these things so that you may be saved. John was a lamp that burned and gave light, and you were willing for a season to bask in his light. But I have testimony more substantial than that of John, for the works that the Father has given me to accomplish, the very works I am doing, testify about me that the Father has sent me. You pore over the scriptures because you presume that by them you possess eternal life. These are the very words that testify about me. Yet you refuse to come to me to have life. I do not accept glory from men, but I know that you do not have the love of Elohim within you. I've come in my Father's name, and you have not received me. But if someone else comes in his own name, you will receive him. How can you believe if you accept glory from one another, yet you do not seek the glory that comes from the only Elohim? Do not think that I will accuse you before the Father. Your accuser is Moses, in whom you have put your hope. If you had believed Moses, you would have believed me, because he wrote about me. But since you do not believe what he wrote, how will you believe what I say? Ooh, there's a lot in this
I was
chapter.
about to say, holy cow.
Man, wow.
Thanks for reading that, Matthew. Yeah, there's a ton in here. What's your first thoughts, guys?
Let me get to where, let's see. Let me read verse 3 again. On these walkways lay a great number of the sick, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed, awaiting the moving of the water. So I thought about another passage where Yeshua talks about living waters. So everybody is spiritually sick to some degree, and we need the Father's living waters to cleanse us of all that spiritual sickness.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So I've heard in the past that it was tradition that an angel did that, and it wasn't actually, because I actually got to get a chance to go to Israel and see the pool, and the way they explain it is like that's just tradition. But like it seems from this that nope, the Father was providing a way for people to get healed, and there was actually an angel, and like it seems pretty literal.
Yeah, there's a debate on some manuscripts don't have this. I think it's the Byzantine doesn't have this passage, but the Textus Receptus does have the passage, and three others, I believe, does have the passage. So the ancient manuscripts from which they formed the Greek, translated the Greek New Testament writings.
Is it in the Aramaic?
I can't remember which ones have it, which ones don't, but I think there's more that do have it than don't. But either way, I don't know if it's tradition or not. I know that for whatever reason, this particular moment here and this particular little passage in verse 4, people really don't like. The people that say, well, it's not in all the manuscripts, and they really don't like it. And I've always wondered why they don't like it. And I think it's fitting, Josh, that you said you went to Israel and they told you, I'm guessing the people giving tours around certain locations, people raised in Judaism have told you that that this is just a tradition. John chapter 5 is just a tradition. Just like they would also say Jesus wasn't really the Son of God.
Right.
All I'm trying to say is it's been documented that in the 1st century AD, the rabbis started to discourage people from reading the scriptures and any angelic activity. And I actually did an entire video on this. And I used Rachel Eliar, the current emeritus Hebrew University professor in Jerusalem, was given a lecture on the Dead Sea Scrolls and how the conclusion she came to startled her because she was raised in Israel in the last 50, 60 years. And she's studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, and she's like, wait a minute, there's a stark difference in the way these people are talking versus what I've learned in Judaism growing up. And what they've done is they've stopped talking about angels and anything related to angels, and encouraged the people. The rabbis in the 1st century started encouraging the people not to read the book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, or the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. And I think that's fascinating because there's angelic activity all throughout those books.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the explanation of the priesthood all throughout those books, which is exactly the purpose that Yeshua was sent for, was to become our high priest of the covenant. So it's like, yeah, if you want to get people from not understanding Yeshua and not to believe in him in the 1st century AD, when people are believing in him like wildfire, then you've got to stop. You've got to take away their foundational understanding of why he was sent and who he became. So to me, it's not a surprise that people in Israel would tell you that this particular passage in John 5 pertaining to an angel doing something miraculous on behalf of Yahweh to the people, to say, oh, that's we don't know if that's true. It's just a tradition, Yeah. So because they also reject the entire book of Jubilees, which was literally narrated by an angel.
And the Messiah. That's kind of a big deal.
Right, and the Messiah, right, yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting that this isn't out of order in my understanding.
Your niece is here.
This isn't out of order for the the rest of the Bible, in my opinion, as far as like an angel that can actually do something for folks. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what else stuck out to you guys in this chapter?
I like the last part where it says, "Do not think that I will accuse you before the Father." That's verse 45. Your accuser is Moses, in whom you have put your hope. If you had believed Moses, you would have believed me, because he wrote about me. So that's always interesting to look at possible verses that are referring to the Messiah in the Torah.
Well, it's just funny. It's like, okay, fine. You want to hang on Moses? I'll let him judge you then. You're still going to fail.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see that there's a pretty big distinction here. Let me see here. The way that Hebrews believe. Hey, brothers, I think one of you, there's a lot of background noise happening. I'm not sure.
Sorry, my wife just got here with my niece. I apologize.
Oh, it's okay. All right. So I think you have a really, really good mic, Matthew.
Yes, I do.
But yeah, here, I mean, he's basically laying into these Pharisees, right? Because he's already told them they're not even believing what Moses wrote. That's kind of a big deal. Speaking to the people that claim to be the people that venerate Moses and hold up Moses as the greatest patriarch of their faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of sad that he has to actually go this route with them, because this is the problem the whole time. The whole backdrop of Yeshua's ministry is the Pharisees have been teaching people that, oh, you need to, come to the synagogue on the Sabbath and hear us read from the law and the prophets and hear us read from Moses. But then in practical application, they're teaching people traditions of Judaism from the Talmud. So I think this is really, he's calling them out with this stuff, that they don't actually believe Moses. Otherwise, they would have believed him. And of course, literally, because, Deuteronomy 18 tells you that Yahweh's going to send one like Moses and raise him up as a prophet. And if you don't receive his words, then you're going to be in trouble. Mm-hmm. And this is all that Yeshua is repeating to them, is like, hey man, you're not following what Moses told you, which is God's going to send another prophet like him and raise him up to be, a great leader and a great prophet. And you need to listen and obey what he says. Here I am. I'm the fulfillment of that. And I'm telling you stuff and you're ignoring me, so like there's going to be problems here. You don't believe him. You definitely don't believe me. So,
yeah. And I think Yeshua didn't lose any opportunity where he could pick a fight with the scribes and Pharisees.
Yeah.
This is one of many examples. Matthew 23 is another one too.
Yes. It looks like they pick the fights with him. He just doesn't let them get away with it.
Oh yeah. He's like, all right, I got you.
Yeah. Fine. You want Moses to be your judge as you claim? He'll judge you, buddy. Don't even need me. I really was fascinated by the stuff with the Sabbath. The Pharisees got all bent out of shape because he picked up his mat. That's allowed. That's extra rules added on top of what the Father had instructed. Nowhere did the Father say you can't pick up a mat because that's work.
That's all that Talmudic stuff.
But what's interesting is Jesus' response. I don't really have an answer for this. I don't know what to do with verse 17. But Jesus answered them, "To this very day, my Father is at his work, and I too am working." It almost was like wait a minute, like but doesn't he say that the Sabbath is made for man, not man for the Sabbath? But they're keeping Sabbath in heaven, but maybe Elohim is Lord over the Sabbath. He mentions that's like, how does that work? Like, because he's Lord over it, I just kind of was a little bit of a mind bend for a second. I was like, well, wait a minute here.
Yeah, well, I think that the context is what work is being described here, because it's kind of a he's addressing the semantic argument the Pharisees are trying to impose by claiming Yeshua healing people on the Sabbath is work,
right? When
in fact it's not. That's not the definition of work. The definition of work is create your vocation, your profession that creates income and money for profit. So this is him.
Time for money.
Yeah. This is Yeshua doing an act of love and mercy to a guy, of healing him miraculously. That's not work. That would be. And this is why I think it's so synonymous with the concept of the angel stirring the waters so that people could get healed, because that's also, what we read back in the angel of the presence over the temple, the tabernacle. Like there was a conduit from which God's power flowed to the people for them to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
So we see this in 2 Chronicles chapter 30 and the Hezekiah's Passover, when people show up unclean, and then Hezekiah has to pray for them to be healed, and it says the Lord healed them, because there's an angel of the presence there.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that's fascinating you just mentioned, Sean, you said that, what is work? Work is what provides you with your income, like the thing that, supplies the bills, meets your needs.
Yeah.
God doesn't have needs. So by definition, it's almost impossible for him to work on the Sabbath.
Right. Right. And of course, all he
Yeah.
does anyway is just help people, right? It's just ministry.
Yeah.
He's not going out there. He's not creating another creation model on the
Yeah.
Sabbath. Like all he's doing is helping what he's already created to make it function better in a loving capacity. And so like he's definitely, it's not work to heal somebody that's in repair. And here's the interesting part. I'm gonna put this back on screen. Look what Yeshua says to this man that he healed. Verse 14. After Jesus found the man at the temple and said to him, "See, you've been made well. Stop sinning, or else something worse may happen to you."
Yeah.
Always
So
points back to the Torah.
let me just play funny for a minute, guys. If we don't have to do the law of God anymore, which is the definition of sin, transgressing the law of God. If we don't have to do that anymore, then why would Yeshua tell this guy to stop transgressing the law of God, or else another bad consequence may happen to you?
Doesn't make much sense to me.
Right?
Well, he also gives. I'm sorry. He also gives credence to when the blind man. They were like, "Well, whose sin was it? Was it him or his parents' sin?" Like Jesus himself is saying, like bad stuff happens as a result of your sin. So it was normal for them to have that thought. But the other man,
yeah. So
ties into Matthew 5:17.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here's a guy that I don't know what he did. Right? We're not trying to speculate what he did, but apparently something caused him to be an invalid. Now, I don't know if this is engaging in the idolatry that was happening in the land, to where, who knows, like there's other temples in the land that were happening at the same time, especially in Samaria, where people were worshiping false gods and all the rituals that go along with that. So there's a very strong possibility that, who knows, it could have been there's no way to tell. The point is, Yeshua is trying to say to the guy, look, go do Torah, so that blessing will come upon you instead of cursing.
Yep.
This is Leviticus or Deuteronomy 28:29.
I mean.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And of course, I just love it how both here in Matthew 12 and in John 5, Yeshua has to defend himself against these Pharisees by like, look, guys, I'm healing people. How can you be mad about that? How can you go to this dude and be like, how dare you walk around with your mat? And he's like, I just got healed. Like, this mat is for the invalid. Like, don't you guys understand? We carry these mats because we lay on them because we can't walk. Like, I just got healed. Do you not recognize what you're looking at? Like
that just happened.
Yeah. Like, talk about haters, man. These haters are just nonstop. Man. You're like, oh, how dare you be healed? How dare you?
What's wrong with you?
Go walk home. How dare you try to go back to your family, live a productive life, and be a member of society again? Like, it's just, I just want to drop kick these people sometimes. So other than that, obviously the big one here that a lot of Trinitarians do not seem to either read quickly or do not take a moment to pause and understand what it's saying. Verse 18, because of this, the Jews tried all the harder to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, not only, that's their impression that he was breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own father, making himself equal with God. Mm-hmm. So how are you equal with God by calling God your own father? Do you guys, how Trinitarians take this verse and they'll say, look, he's co-equal, co-eternal right here because it says he's making himself equal with God. Now, because he called God his own father, at any point in any understanding of Hebraic mindset, are you ever equal to your father?
No.
Okay. So we got in the sentence, he called God his father. And then it says, quote, making himself equal with God.
But we have to remember that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Josh.
No, you got it, brother.
I was going to say, we have to remember this is the Pharisees' interpretation of what's going on anyways.
Exactly.
Well, but as you've talked a lot about agency, when the parable of the father and the son, with the oldest son, he's like, everything I have is yours. Like, everything is mine. And the best example I think we have in scripture of the relationship between the father and son is Joseph and Pharaoh. Like, Joseph was given all the authority of Pharaoh. He essentially, except for to Pharaoh, he was Pharaoh to the people. Like, he had all that authority except to Pharaoh. Joseph was still under Pharaoh. He was never, if you were to go to ask Joseph, he would never say, oh yeah, me and Pharaoh were equal. He'd be like, Pharaoh would be like, wait a minute, time out, son. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's his right-hand man.
Yeah. I've given you all my authority, but you ain't me.
Right.
Don't push it, bud.
And Paul even tries to go to these links to explain this in 1 Corinthians 15, where he says, is he not, all things were, it's clear that all things were subjected to the Son except for God. Right. And so it's like, clearly they're not on the same level of authority, because one's a son who come from his father. And this is why I love, like we were talking about, it is the perception, is the false claim of the wicked Pharisees to say he's breaking Sabbath and that he's making himself equal with God. So the context of the entire interaction should help you understand that you're dealing with false accusation out of context to scripture, right? Bad theology. But unfortunately, that's not. I mean, also, dispensationalism will play off this as well and say, "See, Jesus could break the Sabbath and get away with it." Like, wait a minute. What do we, like? How are you defining the term breaking the Sabbath? How are you? You're literally taking the false accusation of the Pharisees as doctrine, as opposed to knowing the front of the book as true doctrine. So this is, don't find yourself falling into the camp of the people that was accusing Jesus to death. Like that, to me, that's just another thing. It baffles me, but it really is just an outward result of people not reading their Bibles.
Well, and it's interesting. I got into this Trinitarian debate with a friend of mine, because I was like, hey, I don't know that our typical definition of the Trinity is we can be found in the Bible. He's like, well, Jesus claims to be God. And so I went and looked at all the Gospels, and he never claims to be God. He claims to be the Son of God. Right. And he claims his Father. And he's like, well, but he says that we're one. It's like, yeah, but then he also asked that we could be one with him. So like, it doesn't make sense.
That.
And
in that same chapter in John 5, he says it multiple times that the Father sent me. The Father sent me. The Father sent me. Moses talked about me. Yeah. I'm the one he even calls himself the Son of Man at one point, which, if you understand that, from Daniel 7 and 1 Enoch 46 and 48, the Son of Man was the one sent by the Father. Yeah. To rule the earth and judge the earth with righteousness and give himself as do priestly duties on behalf of mankind. Like, it's like, so he's trying to call upon the Pharisee. He's trying to use these terms because he's assuming the Pharisees knows what he's talking about, because they do know the truth. This is what, Matthew talked about a minute ago, where he referenced Matthew 23, where Yeshua is calling out the Pharisees in Matthew 23. And he says to them, you hold the keys of the kingdom, but then shut them up so no one else can get in. Because this is my understanding of that application with John chapter 5 and this interaction here. Yeshua knows the Pharisees know proper doctrine, but are intentionally teaching something different to the people. This is why he looks at them with no mercy, calls them a brood of vipers, calls them whitewashed tombs, calls them thieves, liars, and murderers.
Hypocrites.
And hypocrites. That's the definition of hypocrite, right? You're doing the opposite of what you know to be right. So it's like they knew proper doctrine. Some of, at least the people he's talking to here, but they're not in this particular aspect, I should say, of who the Son of Man is and who he's supposed to be. But they're withholding it from the people, and this is just pure wickedness. Yeah. So he's calling them out on it, and all along the way, just keeps repeating over and over and over, "I was sent by the Father. I was sent by the Father." The Father didn't send himself. He sent his Son. That was the whole point of the Messiah. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's almost as if the central, and I apologize, guys, I'm getting a little excited, but I've had to address this Trinitarian thing so many times since we started our channel. It's become a point of brothers and sisters ostracizing themselves from us, calling us heretics, calling us faithless, calling us preaching a different gospel, all this nonsense, all these accusations and slander, because they're taking words out of context and not using their definitions. And then not even if you didn't go that route of approach, even if you just try to say, look, Jesus replies over and over and over, he is the Son sent by the Father. He's not the Father. He says multiple times, the Father's greater than I. Yeah. He says in John 10, the Father's greater than I. In John 17, verse 3-5, he says the Father's the one true God.
I can do nothing of myself. He says that too.
He says that in this passage, right, that we just read.
Yep. One of the things that I've done, I grew up Southern Baptist and would have been able to recite all the dispensation theology and all the Trinitarian stuff. And I had it all. I was a youth pastor at one point teaching that stuff. And when I had the blessing of getting sick and I just got to spend a bunch of time reading. One of the things that I've done since then is when I come across a topic where I'm like, man, this has got to be kind of shifted. Let me see. I'll pick a gospel book. I'll pick Matthew, I'll pick Luke, I'll pick Mark, one of them. And I just read it through and say, okay, this particular topic, I want to pretend that I don't know anything. And just, if I was to read it plainly as Jesus explains it, what conclusion would I come to? And when you do that, because Jesus was meant to set the record straight, right? He was meant to reveal what actually was the truth. And I've been blown away by how much mental gymnastics has to be done if you just read it what it says and read the way Yeshua talks about any of the topics, whether it's Trinity, whether it's life after death. There's so many of them where it's like, I got to be honest, if we're just two guys talking and I just read through what it says and let it say what it says, I can't come to some of these, doctrines that I've learned for so long. And Trinity is one of them.
That's a big one.
It really is. And I always try to remind people, guys, just from a theological level, Yeshua was sent to be our Messiah, whom embodied the role of a priest.
Mm-hmm.
So just like we asked before, when we were looking at this thing in Genesis 24, this peculiar wording of what is the process of the priesthood, who's there, what's going on, right? Yeshua was sent to be a high priest of the covenant, to minister, as Hebrews tells us, in the heavenly tabernacle above. So we don't need the angels in between anymore. Okay, so he goes to the top of the ladder, so to speak, right? As a result of that, if you are co-equal and co-eternal with the Father, you cannot minister to someone in authority over you.
Yeah.
The whole concept, the whole baseline mantra, bumper sticker phrase of the Trinity, that Yeshua and Jesus, or excuse me, that Yeshua and Yahweh are co-equal and co-eternal, is antithetical, is the opposite of sound doctrine. It is the opposite of the reason Yeshua was sent. It is the opposite of the position Yeshua embodies and performs on your behalf right now. It takes away his priesthood.
Yep.
And this is why people don't understand how he's still doing Torah for you, because they don't they've heard dispensational theology based off of old school Catholic doctrine. That's where it comes from. And honestly, it comes from Judaism even before that. And it's just the same repackaged bad doctrine of demons that confuses people, because then you don't even understand truly what your Messiah is doing for you and the expectation he has for you, because the whole purpose of what he's doing for you means if he's making atonement for you, that means you transgress something.
Yeah.
There's something to repent of.
There's something to repent of. That there's definitions to these ideas. So this whole concept that so many Americans in our culture have been taught, that once you come to faith in Jesus, that you've arrived, you're done. You just got to say the words, Romans 10:9-10, right? You confess your mouth, believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, you'll be saved. And then suddenly you just walk away and everything's supposed to change. Yet Yeshua tells somebody, hey, when you walk away, stop sinning so that it could
go and sin no more.
Worse happens to you. Meaning, do what's right so that good things happen to you, right?
Stop breaking the Torah. So, Sean, I'm going to have to jump off here. I got an interview in like 15 minutes. I really appreciate the opportunity to have me on.
All right, we're actually done. I appreciate you guys coming on. Yeah, this was the last of it. But if you got to jump off, I understand, brother. We'll just do some final thoughts with Josh. So good to have you on here, Matthew.
You too.
Nice to meet you, Josh. We might need to connect on Facebook.
Yes, we will.
I enjoyed talking with y'all.
You too, brother.
Thanks
for
Shalom, y'all.
being here. Shalom, brother. So those who are reading along at the house, guys, for study, John chapter 5, Jesus heals a crippled man near the pool of Bethesda. The Pharisees accuse the healed man of working because he was now walking away from the pool with his mat. The Jews began to persecute Yeshua because he was healing people on the Sabbath. Yeshua warns them that John the Baptist testified about him being the Son of Man to come, sent by the Almighty. Yeshua tells the Jews he was sent by his Father as the Son of Man who will resurrect and judge all men. We didn't even really get into a lot of that, did we, Josh? The whole resurrection concept.
Yeah. That's why I said this passage was packed.
Yeah, there's so much in here, right? Yeshua, lastly, he warns them, that's the Pharisees, the Jews that were accusing him. He warns them that Moses spoke of him and that his works validate that he is from God.
Yeah.
So this is a huge chapter here for the loving example of our Messiah, who was sent by the Father to do the Father's behavior, which is Torah, and to do that faithfully so he could step into the role of his priesthood after his death and resurrection, so that he gets to the point of resurrecting all of mankind and judging all of mankind. This is a big chapter.
And it's what's so sad is whether it's the Trinity or biblical cosmology or the priesthood or the resurrection, all of it is so intricately tied together that when you start to pull little pieces away and let's make the Trinity something where they're the same. Let's make the priesthood where it's like this. What you ultimately miss is what's available to us. Because I know that since I've come to this understanding and watched your channel and looked at what this is, and as I read the scriptures in the Old Testament, everything, oh my gosh, like there's a reason why some of the different patriarchs that got it were willing to go to such ridiculous lengths to serve God. And when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like finding a field and going back and burying a treasure and selling everything you own to come back and find this, because once you understand what is actually available to you, everything else looks ridiculous. And it's just such a shame because people think, well, the Trinity is not that big of a topic. Biblical cosmology is not that big of a topic. The priesthood is not that big of a deal. It's like, if you start messing with some of these things, then you don't fully understand the resurrection. And we have these ideas of being wispy ghosts that hang out and play on harps versus a better version of my body that's more capable of what I can do now. And I could go on forever about it. I don't want to belabor the point, but
yeah, it's a beautiful message that the enemy intentionally tries to shade, change, twist, any way he can.
He knows what happens when people hear the truth.
Yep.
What I used to read about in Acts, and when I'd see Paul and how he changed all this stuff, I was like, man, I got to be honest, that's not the Christianity that I get to experience every day in church. Something changed. Yeah. We stopped being obedient, and we didn't know what the heck we were doing. We're not even studying the right gospel.
Yeah, well, we couldn't defend our faith because we weren't being explained. The faith wasn't being explained to us as it's plainly written. So yeah, it becomes very disheartening, and it becomes so the people that don't understand it because it's not being explained according to the words in the book, they know something's not right, so they end up either leaving or they have to go into a version of cognitive dis where they just say, I'll never understand it, and I'm just going to be a cheerleader for this concept regardless of understanding.
Which then makes you not want to try anymore and not read. And it's like I was talking about earlier. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say real quick. It also makes the outside world look at the people remaining in the church who don't understand it, but are still cheerleaders for it. They have no respect for those people because they can't explain or defend their faith according to the logic and rationale that's plainly written in the scriptures. Yeah. So to the outside, this is why, if you see me do any kind of debates or conversations with atheists or agnostics, I continually keep saying, I hear you, but that's not what the book says. Your argument, your critique, your complaint is based off a misunderstanding of what the book actually says. Would you like to hear what the book actually says? And if you want to be upset with it at that point, that's fine. But I just want to make sure you actually hear and see what the book actually says, and then you can decide if you want to hate it or not. But that's where the outside world looks at a lot of modern day churches as zealots, as opposed to people that have a rational faith that makes sense to their religion, that they can explain to the outsiders, as opposed to, they're just cheerleaders that'll believe anything and they're just getting fleeced by their pastors for money. So
well, I love the line that says, if you want to know if you understand something, try to teach it to a third grader and see if they understand. In the past, there was so many things where if I was to try to articulate why I believed or how something worked, you'd have that's got to take it on faith, or you're trying to explain an infinite God to a finite person. Whereas now I feel like I can explain these massive concepts and a third grader would be like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely.
So, anyways,
guys, Josh, how are you feeling? You got a few minutes to take a couple questions? Or you need to jump off.
I've actually got some people that are here at my house kind of waiting for me. So I'm kind of need to go a little bit sooner rather than later here.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me, brother. I'm going to take a couple questions. Guys, put them in all caps. If you have a question, put it in the live chat, and we'll take a couple questions before we end today, because it's been a while since I've done any Q&A. But thank you so much, Josh, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast. Shabbat shalom, guys.
Shabbat shalom. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Guys, if you have any questions you have about what we talked about today, one of the chapters, content, or some of our discussion, go ahead and put that in all caps so that myself or the moderators can see that and we can get to your question quickly. But other than that, it's been a healthy Torah portion. Lots of stuff to look at, lots of things to talk about in this particular passage, just to get to know the word better, get to know your Heavenly Father better and how he does things. So it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. I'm just grateful he gives me the chance to do this live. It's so much fun. That's funny. Robert Daniels said, I've been having lots of barbecues with all the sacred cows Sean's been salting since I started watching. I appreciate you watching, brother. Appreciate you sticking around, even though possibly one of the things I've spoken about may have been something that you never heard before, or you heard taught differently. All right. Tony C is asking, who will experience the weeping and gnashing of teeth? That depends on the context of where that term is used, but mostly it's going to be the people that are outside the New Jerusalem that are being judged as goats. So these are the people that are going to be judged as goats because they reject Messiah. They're angry that his authority has come to rule on the earth, and they're of course going to be slain by the angels as a part of their judgment, and then sent to another place of emotional torment, where I'm sure there's also weeping and gnashing of teeth and the unrighteous side of Sheol. So hopefully that's a decent answer for you, brother. Tom, what's up, brother? Thanks for joining us this afternoon. He's asking, are there any other examples of the birthright being linked to the priesthood? You have to go back to that show that I did. I don't have them off the top of my head, but yes, I do a full breakdown with the inheritance and the priesthood and the blessing and everything. And as far as people that are usually the firstborn is the one that gets the birthright. He'd also be the elder that's lived life longer, so he's had instruction from his father more. As far as how to behave, how to do Torah properly. So usually he would be the one that assumes the idea of the priest, but not always. It depends on their behavior, and how they were evaluated. Hopefully that's a decent answer for you, brother. But I apologize. I can't remember, Tom, the name of that video that I did. I think it was like, did Abraham break Torah? Let me see if I can find it real quick. It wasn't a milk and meats. So let me just run through a couple of videos real quick and see if I can find it. Depends on the speed of my internet to populate all my videos on the channel real quick. Okay, here it is. Did Abraham break Torah with Isaac over Ishmael? I go into that in that video. I go into it in great depth with a full breakdown and pictures and all kinds of stuff. And I'll put the link in the live chat right now for you, Tom, okay? Jen T is asking, can I explain the land thing again, please, that you were talking about during Ruth? Well, Leviticus 25 shows us that if someone had sold their land because they became poor and they sold their family land that had been passed down to them, that they had a chance to redeem that when they had a chance to pay it back, right? To buy that land back to them. It's kind of like it was held, whoever bought it under the understanding that, hey, if that person comes back to you to buy it again, or if one of their kinsman redeemers, one of their extended family members has the money to buy it back on their behalf, then you need to sell it back to them. You have to sell it back to them, right? Because that's their family land, and you want to keep the land in their own families. And the reason for this is because, remember, the tribes of Israel were all next to each other. Their land was all next to each other in the overall territory they were given. So if someone from the tribe of Judah, which is right next to the tribe of Benjamin, if he's on the border and he gets poor and tries to sell his land, and someone from the tribe of Benjamin is like, yeah, sure, I'll buy your land. Suddenly that's land is now the tribe of Benjamin. You see how that works? And if the person from the tribe of Judah or any of his near family cannot legally buy that land back from the tribe of Benjamin, then that land has been forever taken by the tribe of Benjamin through the sale of real estate. The father didn't want that. He wanted them to have, each tribe to have their own proportion of land and let it stay in their family areas. Now, it's still all within the boundary of Israel territory, but that was the idea, was that each tribe would retain their own land. And there was this legal clause, that if someone got poor, they had to sell it, they had the opportunity to buy it back and keep it in their family. So hopefully that's a decent answer for you. Caitlin Aguinaga is asking, what's the argument against lunar Sabbaths? I'm not sure. Could you ask this in a more specific manner? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. We didn't talk about lunar Sabbaths today, so I'm not sure exactly what you think the argument is. So if you could just expound on that question, I'd love to answer it for you. Vlatko Salon is asking, I'm confused on your understanding of the state of the dead, soul sleep or immortal soul. Neither. The immortal soul doctrine is a Catholic doctrine from the 3rd century. We don't teach that. Your soul was not alive before your body was created and given the breath of life. Once your body's been created to give the breath of life, which is the replication for all of mankind, as we see happening with Adam in Genesis 2:7, once that happens for you, your soul now is collecting memories and experiences and emotions and actions from which you will be judged by the every word and deed concept. So once the body dies, that collection of memory, emotions, actions, things you'll be judged by, that soul that has been created, because remember, the body dies, the breath of life, the spirit goes back to God who gave it. The body decays in the ground, but then that leftover information, generically called your soul, that's going to go to a holding cell been created for you that's called Sheol. This is in all throughout the Old Testament and New Testament. And this is where those souls are considered either righteous or unrighteous, and they're going to one or two compartments, like Yeshua explains in Luke 16. And those souls are at a place of rest. That word rest has been generically translated in the English translations to many places as sleep. Our current connotation of the word sleep makes people think they're actually sleeping as opposed to a place of rest. So that's the original definition of the idea of Sheol. It's where your soul goes after the bodily death to await resurrection in a place of rest. That's the whole idea, okay? So this is where the soul of righteous men go to a righteous area. They're segregated from the unrighteous. The righteous souls await resurrection to eternal life, just like we read in John chapter 5. The unrighteous souls await resurrection to judgment, to death, to the second death, stand before Yeshua and be thrown in the lake of fire. That's also what we read in John chapter 5. And that's also what Paul refers to in Acts chapter 24, where he says he was arrested for preaching the resurrection of the righteous and the wicked. So some are resurrected to eternal life, like Daniel tells us in Daniel 12, 1-3. Others are resurrected to eternal shame and contempt. Okay? So there's a difference there. Hopefully that's a decent answer for you, brother. But the soul is not immortal. It doesn't live forever. You're thrown in the lake of fire. It's distinguished and just destroyed from existence. Evangeline Kragi says, why is the bloodline of Yeshua so important if Joseph is not his actual father? Well, because Joseph becomes his adopted father, so he becomes his actual father according to Torah. But yeah, we know he's sent by the Almighty, by the Father above. This is what Paul explains to us in 1 Timothy 3:16, that he was manifested in the flesh, sent by the Father, seen on by angels. So yeah, the bloodline of Yeshua is important because he's traced back through a lineage of people that have, because what was prophesied. Okay, he goes from a lineage of priests and rulers. So from Mary's side, a priesthood for the Levites, from his father Joseph's side, through the lineage of rulers of the kingdom. And this is what was promised to the Messiah, that he would be a priest and a king over Israel. So he was prophesied to come from the line of the tribes of Judah and Levi in the Testament of 12 Patriarchs and the Testament of Levi, as well as in the book of Enoch, even though it doesn't use those tribal names in the book of Enoch, but also, he was prophesied to come from those in Zechariah 6:11-15 as well. So he was going to take the two offices of the priesthood and the kingship and be put into one as the servant of God. That's the ultimate king of Israel, who's a priest as well. So that's why it was kind of important to follow and trace that, so that the foretold word of Yahweh concerning his son would be validated as a testament and a witness to help people believe on him, basically. Oh, okay. So Caitlin is asking, have we done a lesson on the lunar Sabbath versus the Saturday Sabbath? No, we have not. So honestly, it's I don't know. Maybe I'll put it on the list to do in the future. It's a good suggestion, but we have not. We keep a Saturday, seventh-day Sabbath, as what we understand Genesis 2 to explain. Ken Anderson is asking, feet. How is it when our feet are clean, so all of us is clean? Well, I don't. Okay, it's kind of a. I'm going to, for the sake of time, because we're about to jump off here on this broadcast, I'm going to assume what you're asking, and I'm assuming you're asking as far as the idea of washing someone's feet. But technically, according to Torah, the idea of the temple was to be clean. You would wash your whole body. So it wasn't just simply washing your feet. So I'm not exactly sure on the inference of this statement, as far as if you've heard a pastor say something like this, or if you've heard some medical report or whatever. But honestly, you would want to wash your feet coming before the temple if your body was already clean, because whatever you may have stepped on while walking to the temple, right? Because they had livestock running around and dropping poo everywhere and splattering and stuff on the road. So you'd want to make sure that you were clean and not bringing any feces into the temple. So hopefully that's a decent answer for you, brother. Yeah, T. Zebra, yes, that's Genesis 2:7. The spark of life, the breath of life, the Spirit of God that gives to animate the body, the flesh. Those two components together is your Kool-Aid mixture, and out comes the soul, right? That's, you put those two together and out comes a living soul. All right, that's the idea. Genesis 2:7. Okay, guys, I want to answer your questions. I have to understand them. So I apologize if I need you to have to clarify. Blue Doves, thanks for watching. You're asking what happened to people that were declared unclean after the 7-day cleansing. Could they not seek atonement through the sanctuary, or did those rules not apply to them? Well, it depends on how they became unclean. And it depends on if it caused them to miss a feast day or a Sabbath or something, or there's a lot to break down that question. I mean, I appreciate you asking the question. It's not a bad question at all. But yeah, that in the Torah, there would be an idea that if your uncleanness caused you to break a command in another way, then you would bring forward something for atonement. But ultimately, your uncleanness, there's some things that can make you unclean that are just a natural part of life, right? And there's other things that make you unclean because of transgression. So I guess it really depends on the context of how you'd be asking. But other than that, guys, I appreciate everyone asking questions. We're going to end the show for today. I've hitting up 3 hours here. My voice is getting tired. Thank you so much. Hopefully you guys can enjoy this day as you're celebrating Shabbat. I hope you enjoy it today. You take a day of rest. Just focus on the word. Thanks for joining us here for this. And we hope to see you next week for another Torah Portions.